The emergence of Uruk as humanity's first true city represents a pivotal transformation in human organization and settlement patterns. Located in the heart of southern Mesopotamia, approximately 250 kilometers southeast of modern Baghdad, Uruk occupied a position of extraordinary geographic advantage that would prove instrumental in its development into the world's earliest urban centre. The settlement arose where the ancient courses of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created an intricate network of waterways, distributaries and seasonal flood channels that transformed the otherwise arid landscape into a fertile oasis of agricultural potential. The alluvial plains surrounding Uruk consisted of rich, dark soil deposited over millennia by the annual flooding of the twin rivers. This sedimentary foundation, composed of fine silts and organic matter, create agricultural conditions of exceptional fertility. The regular inundation cycles brought not only water, but also nutrients that replenish the soil naturally, allowing for sustained intensive cultivation without the soil depletion that plagued other early agricultural regions. The flat topography of the alluvial plain facilitated the construction of extensive irrigation networks, while the abundance of clay provided an inexhaustible building material for both utilitarian and monumental construction. Uruk's strategic position along ancient trade routes connecting the Iranian plateau to the west with the Arabian Peninsula to the south established it as a natural commercial hub. The city controlled access to several major waterways that served as transportation arteries for goods moving between distant regions. Merchants travelling overland from the Zagros Mountains carrying metals, precious stones, and timber found Uruk a convenient stopping point, while those navigating the river systems could access the Persian Gulf and maritime trade networks. This convergence of trade routes brought exotic materials, new technologies, and cultural influences that would contribute significantly to Uruk's rapid development and innovation. Archaeological investigations at Uruk, conducted continuously since the late 19th century, have revealed a remarkable sequence of cultural and technological developments spanning the crucial transition from village life to urban civilization. The deepest excavated levels, dating to approximately 4000 BC, show evidence of small farming communities practicing mixed agriculture and animal husbandry. These early settlements consisted of simple rectangular houses constructed of mud brick, with rooms organised around central courtyards. Storage facilities for grain and other agricultural products indicate a subsistence economy with limited surplus production. The transformation becomes evident in subsequent archaeological layers, where excavators have uncovered increasingly sophisticated settlement patterns. By 3800 BC, the site shows clear evidence of planned urban development, with streets laid out in organised grids and buildings constructed according to standardised measurements. The pottery assemblages from these levels demonstrate technological advancement, featuring wheel-made vessels of consistent quality and standardised forms that suggest specialised craft production. The appearance of cylinder seals during this period indicates the development of administrative systems for managing property and transactions. Perhaps most significantly, the archaeological record reveals the emergence of monumental architecture that fundamentally altered the character of the settlement. The construction of the Anu Ziggurat, beginning around 3500 BC, represents a watershed moment in human architectural achievement. This massive stepped pyramid, rising approximately 40 metres above the surrounding plain, required the coordinated labour of hundreds of workers over multiple construction seasons. The structure's precise orientation to cardinal directions and its complex internal chambers demonstrates sophisticated understanding of engineering principles and astronomical observation. The ziggurat's construction necessitated unprecedented levels of social organisation and resource management. Archaeological analysis of the building materials reveals that workers quarried limestone from distant sources, transported massive timber beams from mountain forests, and manufactured millions of standardized mud bricks. The logistics of coordinating these activities required administrative systems capable of managing labor gangs, calculating material requirements, and scheduling construction phases. Evidence for these administrative capabilities appears in the form of numerical tablets and early pictographic records found in associated temple complexes. Concurrent with monumental construction, Uruk developed the world's first specialized urban districts. Excavations have identified distinct quarters dedicated to different economic and social functions. The temple precinct, centered around the Anu Ziggurat, occupied the highest ground and contained not only religious structures but also administrative buildings, workshops for luxury goods production, and storage facilities for tribute and offerings. The quality of construction in this area, featuring fired brick facades and elaborate decorative elements, contrasts sharply with residential areas. Craft production districts emerged in other parts of the city, with archaeological evidence revealing specialized workshops for pottery manufacture, textile production, metalworking, and stone carving. These workshops show clear signs of mass production techniques, including the use of molds for creating identical objects and assembly line approaches to manufacturing processes. The concentration of similar activities in specific neighbourhoods suggests that craftsmen organised themselves into professional groups, possibly under the oversight of temple or palace administrators. The development of Uruk's irrigation infrastructure represents another crucial aspect of its urban transformation. Archaeological surveys of the surrounding countryside have mapped an extensive network of canals, levees, and distribution channels that brought water from the main river courses to agricultural fields, extending dozens of kilometres from the city centre. The construction and maintenance of these waterworks required sophisticated hydraulic engineering knowledge and coordinated labour management on a scale previously unknown in human history. The main irrigation canal serving Uruk measured approximately 15 metres in width and extended over 30 kilometres from its intake point on the Euphrates. Secondary channels distributed water throughout the agricultural zone, while smaller field ditches provided irrigation directly to individual plots. The system included control structures such as weirs and sluice gates that allowed farmers to regulate water flow according to seasonal needs and crop requirements. Archaeological evidence suggests that the irrigation network supported intensive cultivation of barley, wheat, dates, and various vegetables, generating agricultural surpluses sufficient to support the city's growing non-agricultural population. The emergence of social stratification at Uruk becomes clearly visible in the archaeological record through differential burial practices and residential architecture. Elite burials from this period contain elaborate grave goods, including imported precious metals, carved stone vessels, and sophisticated jewellery that required skilled craftsmen to produce. These burials often occur in specially constructed tomb chambers with multiple rooms and complex architectural features, contrasting dramatically with simple pit burials of ordinary inhabitants. The residential architecture also reflects growing social differentiation. Large compounds in the temple district feature multiple courtyards, dozens of rooms, and sophisticated architectural details such as decorative friezes and painted walls. These structures likely housed high-ranking priests, administrators, or wealthy merchants who controlled significant resources. Archaeological analysis of room functions suggests that these elite residences included private workshops, storage facilities, and reception areas for conducting business or entertaining guests. Administrative buildings associated with early government structures provide additional evidence for the emergence of ruling elites. The discovery of large archives containing thousands of clay tablets with early cuneiform writing demonstrates the existence of bureaucratic institutions capable of managing complex economic and legal affairs. These archives contain records of land tenure, tax collection, legal proceedings, and commercial transactions that reveal sophisticated systems of governance and social control. The tablets also provide insight into the social hierarchy that developed at Uruk. References to various official titles suggest a complex administrative structure with multiple levels of authority and specialized roles. Some individuals appear to have controlled large estates worked by dependent laborers, while others managed temple properties or oversaw craft production. The concentration of wealth and authority in the hands of relatively few individuals marks a fundamental departure from the egalitarian social structures characteristic of earlier village communities. Archaeological evidence from workshop areas reveals the extent to which craft production had become specialized and centrally controlled. Pottery kilns, capable of firing hundreds of vessels, simultaneously indicate industrial-scale production far exceeding local consumption needs. The standardization of vessel forms and decorative motifs suggests centralized design control, possibly by temple or palace administrators who regulated production for trade or redistribution purposes. Similar patterns appear in textile production, where large installations for processing flax and wool point to organized manufacturing systems. The transformation of Uruk from village settlement to urban center fundamentally altered human relationships with the environment and with each other. The concentration of thousands of inhabitants in a single location created unprecedented challenges in waste management, food distribution, and social coordination. Archaeological deposits from this period show evidence of systematic waste disposal systems, including designated dumping areas and drainage channels that carried refuse away from residential districts. The city's growth also transformed the surrounding landscape through intensive agricultural exploitation and resource extraction. Surveys of the Uruk hinterland reveal evidence of systematic deforestation as growing populations consume timber for construction and fuel. Clay extraction for brick manufacture created large pits that later filled with water, altering local drainage patterns. The expansion of irrigated agriculture converted natural wetlands into cultivated fields, affecting wildlife populations and ecological relationships that had persisted for millennia. The urban innovations that transformed Uruk into the world's first city created a dynamic foundation for unprecedented expansion beyond the boundaries of southern Mesopotamia. By 3500 BC, Uruk's influence began radiating outward through a combination of trade networks, colonial settlements, and cultural diffusion that would establish the first truly international economic system in human history. This expansion represented far more than simple territorial conquest. It constituted the systematic projection of Uruk's administrative methods, technological innovations, and economic practices across vast distances, creating a unified cultural sphere that stretched from the Anatolian highlands to the Iranian plateau. Archaeological evidence reveals that Uruk's expansion followed established trade routes that had connected distant regions for centuries, but the scale and systematic nature of this fourth millennium expansion marked a qualitative transformation in interregional relationships. Excavations at sites throughout the Middle East have uncovered distinctive Uruk-style artifacts, architectural forms, and administrative technologies that demonstrate direct contact with the southern Mesopotamian metropolis. These materials appear not as isolated trade goods, but as comprehensive cultural packages that suggest the establishment of permanent Uruk communities far from their homeland. The northward expansion into Syria and southeastern Anatolia produced some of the most dramatic evidence for Uruk colonization. At Habuba Kabira, located on the Euphrates River in modern Syria, approximately 800 kilometers northwest of Uruk, German archaeologists uncovered a complete Uruk city constructed according to southern Mesopotamian urban planning principles. The settlement featured standardized residential blocks, centralized administrative buildings, and craft production areas identical to those found at Uruk itself. The pottery assemblages, seal impressions, and architectural details demonstrate such precise correspondence with southern prototypes that the site clearly represents a planned colonial foundation rather than gradual cultural influence. The strategic positioning of Habuba Kabira reveals the calculated nature of Uruk expansion. The site controlled a crucial ford across the Euphrates, where the river narrowed sufficiently to permit reliable crossing throughout most of the year. Caravans travelling between Anatolia and Mesopotamia necessarily passed through this bottleneck, allowing Uruk colonists to monitor trade flows and collect transit fees. The settlement's location also provided access to timber resources from the nearby mountains, copper deposits in the Taurus Range, and agricultural lands capable of supporting substantial populations. Similar Uruk colonies appeared at other strategic locations throughout the northern regions. At Arslan Tepe in eastern Anatolia, Italian excavations revealed a massive administrative complex built according to Uruk architectural principles and containing thousands of clay tablets with early cuneiform records. The site's position near major copper mining areas suggests that control of metal resources constituted a primary objective of Uruk expansion. Archaeological analysis of copper artifacts from this period shows consistent trace element signatures indicating systematic exploitation of specific ore sources under centralized management. The expansion eastward into the Iranian plateau followed different patterns but achieved equally impressive results. At Susa, located in southwestern Iran approximately 250 kilometers east of Uruk, French archaeologists uncovered evidence for intensive Uruk cultural influence beginning around 3400 BC. Unlike the complete colonial foundations found in Syria and Anatolia, the Susa evidence suggests a process of cultural transformation in which local elites adopted Uruk administrative practices, architectural styles, and material culture while maintaining their distinct regional identity. The Susa tablets provide remarkable insight into the mechanisms of Uruk expansion. These records, written in early cuneiform script, document complex commercial relationships between Susa and various Mesopotamian cities. The tablets record shipments of precious stones, metals, and exotic materials from the Iranian highlands in exchange for manufactured goods, textiles, and agricultural products from the Mesopotamian lowlands. The sophisticated accounting methods employed in these records demonstrate that Iranian communities had fully adopted Uruk administrative technologies for managing long-distance trade. Archaeological surveys throughout the Iranian plateau have identified dozens of smaller sites with Uruk cultural materials, suggesting that influence extended far beyond major urban centres. At Godin Tepe, located in the central Zagros Mountains, archaeologists discovered a small Uruk trading post complete with standardized pottery, cylinder seals, and cuneiform tablets. The site's remote location, over 500 kilometers from the nearest major settlement, demonstrates the remarkable reach of Uruk commercial networks. The trading post apparently served as a collection point for precious stones, metals, and other highland products destined for Mesopotamian markets. The development of cuneiform writing during this period of expansion represents one of humanity's most significant intellectual achievements. The earliest cuneiform tablets from Uruk, dating to approximately 3400 BC, consist primarily of numerical records and simple pictographic symbols used for administrative purposes. These proto-cuneiform texts document transactions involving livestock, grain, land, and manufactured goods, revealing the complex economic relationships that necessitated systematic record-keeping. The evolution from pictographic symbols to true cuneiform script occurred remarkably rapidly, with fully developed writing appearing at Uruk by 3200 BC. The transition involved the standardization of sign forms, the development of phonetic values for symbols, and the creation of grammatical conventions for expressing complex ideas. Archaeological analysis of tablet archives shows that scribes experimented with various approaches to representing language, before settling on the wedge-shaped impressions made by pressing reed styluses into clay that gave cuneiform its distinctive appearance. The administrative applications of cuneiform writing transformed the possibilities for managing complex organizations and long-distance relationships. Tablets from Uruk archives document sophisticated legal procedures, including contracts for land sales, marriage agreements, and commercial partnerships. These records reveal legal concepts such as property ownership, contractual obligation, and dispute resolution that provided the foundation for stable economic relationships across vast distances. The ability to create permanent portable records enabled Uruk merchants and administrators to coordinate activities between widely separated locations with unprecedented precision. The spread of cuneiform writing throughout the Uruk cultural sphere demonstrates the practical advantages of systematic record-keeping for managing complex economies. Sites throughout Syria, Anatolia, and Iran have yielded cuneiform tablets written in local languages but employing the administrative techniques developed at Uruk. This technological diffusion created a unified system for commercial documentation that facilitated trade relationships between communities speaking different languages and following different cultural traditions. Technological innovations accompanying Uruk expansion revolutionized production methods and transportation capabilities throughout the Middle East. The potter's wheel, first developed at Uruk around 3500 BC, enabled craftsmen to produce ceramic vessels with unprecedented speed and consistency. Archaeological analysis of pottery assemblages shows that wheel-made vessels gradually replaced hand-built ceramics at sites throughout the Uruk cultural sphere, suggesting systematic technology transfer through trade contacts and colonial settlements. The potter's wheel technology required significant modifications to traditional ceramic production methods. Potters needed to learn new techniques for centering clay on the rotating wheel, controlling wall thickness during shaping, and managing the drying process for wheel-made vessels. The adoption of this technology also necessitated changes in workshop organisation, as wheel production required dedicated workspace and specialised tools. Archaeological evidence from various sites shows that potter's wheel technology spread along the same routes as other Uruk cultural innovations, suggesting coordinated efforts to transfer technical knowledge. The development of sailboat technology during this period transformed river and maritime transportation throughout the region. Early depictions on Uruk seals and pottery show boats equipped with rectangular sails that enabled navigation against river currents and wind patterns. This innovation dramatically reduced transportation costs for bulk commodities and enabled the movement of heavy materials over long distances. Archaeological evidence from harbour installations at various Uruk sites shows sophisticated understanding of boat construction, dock facilities, and cargo handling techniques. The standardization of weights and measures represents another crucial technological achievement that facilitated long-distance trade relationships. Excavations at Uruk and related sites have uncovered sets of stone weights, conforming to consistent standards based on specific grain quantities. These weight systems enabled merchants from different regions to conduct transactions using mutually understood measurement criteria. The spread of Uruk weight standards throughout the Middle East created the foundation for international commercial relationships that persisted for centuries. Metallurgical innovations during the Uruk expansion period produced significant advances in tool and weapon production. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts shows increasing sophistication in alloying techniques, casting methods, and finishing processes. Copper tools and weapons became standardized in form and quality, suggesting centralized production systems that supplied multiple markets. The control of metal resources and production techniques provided Uruk communities with significant advantages in both economic competition and military capabilities. The religious and administrative hierarchies that emerged during Uruk expansion created unprecedented levels of social complexity and institutional authority. Temple complexes at Uruk and colonial sites developed elaborate organizational structures with multiple levels of priestly authority, specialized ritual functions, and extensive property holdings. These religious institutions controlled vast agricultural estates, managed craft production workshops, and maintained archives documenting their various economic activities. The Yana temple complex at Uruk, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, became the prototype for religious institutions throughout the expanded cultural sphere. Archaeological excavations have revealed a massive architectural complex covering several hectares and containing dozens of individual buildings connected by courtyards, corridors, and ceremonial spaces. The complex included workshops for producing luxury goods, storage facilities for tribute and offerings, administrative offices for managing temple properties, and residential quarters for religious personnel. The administrative hierarchy associated with the Yana complex demonstrates sophisticated institutional organization. Cuneiform tablets from temple archives document various official positions with specific responsibilities and authority levels. High-ranking priests controlled major policy decisions and resource allocation, while specialized administrators managed particular aspects of temple operations such as agricultural production, craft manufacturing, or commercial relationships. Lower-level functionaries handled routine administrative tasks and maintained detailed records of daily activities. Similar temple complexes appeared at Uruk colonial sites throughout the expanded cultural sphere, each adapted to local conditions while maintaining essential organizational principles. These institutions served not only religious functions, but also economic and administrative roles that integrated local communities into the broader Uruk system. Temple personnel managed trade relationships, coordinated craft production, and maintained the communication networks that connected distant settlements with the southern Mesopotamian homeland. The economic integration achieved through Uruk expansion created unprecedented opportunities for specialization and technological development. Communities throughout the cultural sphere focused on producing goods for which they possessed particular advantages while obtaining other necessities through trade relationships. Highland communities specialized in mining and metalworking, taking advantage of local ore deposits and technical expertise. Lowland areas concentrated on agricultural production and textile manufacturing, utilizing their fertile soils and established craft traditions. This economic specialization generated substantial wealth for communities that successfully integrated into the Uruk trade networks. Archaeological evidence shows dramatic improvements in living standards at sites that participated actively in long-distance commerce. Elite residences became larger and more elaborate, craft production increased in volume and sophistication, and communities invested in monumental architecture and public works projects. The concentration of wealth also enabled increased support for specialized activities such as artistic production, religious ceremonies, and administrative functions. The military aspects of Uruk expansion remain somewhat obscure due to limited archaeological evidence for warfare during this period. However, the systematic nature of colonial foundations and the control of strategic resources suggest that military capabilities played important roles in establishing and maintaining Uruk dominance. Fortified settlements at key locations indicate awareness of potential conflicts, while standardized weapons and military equipment suggest organized approaches to defense and conquest. The cultural achievements and territorial expansion that characterized Uruk's dominance during the 4th millennium BC created the foundation for an extraordinary flowering of political power and literary achievement during the early dynastic period. As the influence of Uruk's colonial network began to consolidate into more localized power structures, around 3100 BC, the city itself entered a phase of internal development that would produce some of history's most enduring cultural monuments. The emergence of powerful individual rulers during this period marked a fundamental shift from the collective temple-based authority that had characterized earlier urban development to more personalized forms of kingship that would define Mesopotamian political culture for millennia. Archaeological investigations in the deepest levels of Uruk's early dynastic strata have uncovered evidence for increasingly elaborate royal burial practices that suggest the emergence of divine or semi-divine kingship. Excavations in the royal cemetery area, located adjacent to the Anna temple complex, revealed a series of monumental tomb structures dating to approximately 2700 BC. These burial chambers, constructed of carefully fitted limestone blocks and sealed with bitumen mortar, contained grave goods of unprecedented richness and variety. Gold jewellery crafted with sophisticated granulation techniques, silver vessels decorated with Rapu's animal motifs, and weapons inlaid with precious stones demonstrate the concentration of wealth and artistic skill available to Uruk's ruling elite. The most significant of these royal burials, designated Tomb PG 789 by excavators, contain the remains of a male individual accompanied by an extraordinary array of ceremonial objects. The burial included a golden helmet crafted in the likeness of a human head, with carefully rendered facial features and an elaborate headdress incorporating lapis lazuli and carnelian inlays. Accompanying weapons featured gold-hilted daggers with blades of exceptionally pure copper, spearheads decorated with intricate engravings, and a ceremonial mace topped with a carved stone lion's head. The technical sophistication required to produce these objects indicates the presence of specialized craftsmen working exclusively for royal patrons. Analysis of organic materials preserved in the tomb reveals additional aspects of early dynastic royal culture. Fragments of textiles woven with gold thread demonstrate advanced weaving techniques and the importation of precious materials from distant sources. Wooden objects inlaid with shell and stone show sophisticated joinery methods and decorative arts. The presence of musical instruments, including a silver lyre with bull's head soundbox, suggests that royal courts maintained professional musicians and that ceremonial occasions involved elaborate artistic performances. The historical figure of Gilgamesh emerges from this archaeological context as both a legendary character and a probable historical ruler whose reign coincided with Uruk's political and cultural zenith during the early dynastic period. Cuneiform tablets from slightly later periods consistently refer to Gilgamesh as the fifth king of Uruk, following the mythical flood, placing his reign sometime around 2700 to 2650 BC according to Mesopotamian chronological traditions. While no contemporary inscriptions definitively identify Gilgamesh as a historical figure, the consistency of later references and the archaeological evidence for powerful early dynastic rulers at Uruk strongly suggest a historical basis for the legendary king. The Sumerian king list, compiled during the 3rd millennium BC but drawing on much earlier traditions, credits Gilgamesh with a reign of 126 years and describes him as the one who surpassed all kings. This obviously mythologized account nevertheless preserves what appear to be genuine historical memories of a ruler who achieved extraordinary military and political success. The text associates Gilgamesh with major construction projects at Uruk, including the rebuilding of the city's defensive walls and the expansion of temple complexes, activities that correspond to archaeological evidence for intensive building programs during the relevant period. Contemporary administrative tablets from Uruk contain references to individuals bearing names similar to those associated with Gilgamesh in later literary sources. A tablet dating to approximately 2650 BC mentions a high official named Gilgamesh's life in connection with major irrigation works, suggesting that the legendary king's name had already acquired significant cultural resonance within decades of his presumed death. Other tablets reference individuals with names incorporating elements from the Gilgamesh literary tradition, indicating that stories about this ruler circulated widely in oral form before their eventual transcription into epic literature. The archaeological record provides substantial evidence for the military capabilities that would have been necessary for a ruler of Gilgamesh's legendary stature. Excavations at Uruk have uncovered weapons caches dating to the early dynastic period that demonstrate sophisticated metallurgical techniques and standardized production methods. Bronze spearheads show consistent alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques that suggest centralized armament production under royal control. Arrowheads crafted from carefully knapped flint display remarkable uniformity in size and shape, indicating systematic military organization and training. Fortification systems constructed during this period reveal advanced understanding of defensive architecture and siege warfare. The famous walls of Uruk, mentioned prominently in the Epic of Gilgamesh, have been partially traced through archaeological survey and excavation. The defensive circuit stretched approximately 9 kilometers around the city and incorporated both the urban core and surrounding agricultural areas. Construction techniques included massive mud brick foundations reinforced with bitumen mortar and faced with baked brick in critical sections. The walls featured projecting bastions at regular intervals and elaborate gate complexes with multiple defensive chambers. The composition of the Epic of Gilgamesh represents one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated attempts to explore fundamental questions about mortality, friendship, and the meaning of human achievement through narrative literature. The earliest known versions of Gilgamesh stories appear on cuneiform tablets dating to approximately 2500 BC, written in Sumerian and consisting of individual episodes that were later integrated into longer narrative sequences. These early compositions demonstrate remarkable literary sophistication, employing complex poetic structures, symbolic imagery, and psychological characterization that establish conventions for epic literature throughout the ancient world. The standard version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, compiled during the 2nd millennium BC but drawing on much earlier Sumerian sources, preserves what appears to be authentic early dynastic historical and cultural material. The epic's detailed descriptions of Uruk's architecture, religious practices, and social customs correspond closely to archaeological evidence from the relevant period. References to specific locations within the city, including the Iana temple and various ceremonial spaces, demonstrate intimate familiarity with Uruk's urban layout during the early dynastic period. The character of Enkidu in the Gilgamesh epic provides valuable insight into early dynastic concepts of civilization and wilderness. Enkidu's transformation from wild man to civilized urban dweller reflects contemporary concerns about the relationship between settled agricultural communities and nomadic pastoral groups that inhabited the regions surrounding Mesopotamian cities. Archaeological evidence shows increasing contact between urban centres and mobile populations during this period, including trade relationships, military conflicts, and cultural exchange that influenced the development of both urban and nomadic societies. The friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, which forms the emotional core of the epic narrative, explores themes of loyalty, cooperation, and mutual dependence that reflect the social values of early dynastic urban communities. The epic's emphasis on the importance of personal relationships and shared adventures resonates with archaeological evidence for the emergence of warrior aristocracies during this period. Elite burial sites contain paired burials and shared grave goods that suggest close personal bonds between high-ranking individuals, possibly reflecting the kind of heroic friendships celebrated in epic literature. The quest for immortality that drives the epic's later episodes reflects genuine early dynastic concerns about death and the afterlife. Archaeological evidence from royal burials shows elaborate attempts to preserve the deceased and provide for their continued existence in death. Mummification techniques, though less sophisticated than later Egyptian practices, appear in some high-status burials from this period. Grave goods include food offerings, personal possessions, and ritual objects intended to sustain the deceased in the afterlife, demonstrating beliefs about post-mortem existence that parallel themes explored in the Gilgamesh epic. The political context of early dynastic Uruk involved complex relationships with other Sumerian city-states that frequently erupted into warfare over territorial boundaries, water rights, and commercial privileges. Cuneiform tablets from this period document military campaigns launched by Uruk rulers against neighbouring cities including Ur, Umma, and Lagash. These conflicts typically involve disputes over agricultural land in border regions, control of irrigation canals, and access to trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with highland regions. The military organisation required for these interstate conflicts demonstrates sophisticated logistical capabilities and tactical understanding. Administrative tablets record the mobilisation of troops from various districts within Uruk's territory, the procurement of weapons and supplies, and the coordination of military campaigns lasting several months. Royal inscriptions describe the capture of enemy cities, the imposition of tribute payments, and the installation of puppet rulers loyal to Uruk. These activities required administrative systems capable of managing complex military operations and integrating conquered territories into Uruk's political structure. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites provides additional information about early dynastic warfare methods and military technology. Excavations at Tel Agrab, site of a major battle between Uruk and coalition forces from several rival cities, uncovered thousands of bronze arrowheads, spear points, and axe heads scattered across the ancient battlefield. Analysis of weapon damage patterns suggests that early dynastic armies employed coordinated tactical formations and specialised military roles. Heavy infantry equipped with bronze-tipped spears and leather armour engaged in close combat, while archers provided supporting fire from protected positions. The religious developments that accompanied Uruk's political expansion during the early dynastic period transformed the city into the primary cult centre for several major Mesopotamian deities. The worship of Anu, the sky god and supreme deity of the Sumerian pantheon, reached new levels of institutional sophistication with the construction of massive temple complexes and the establishment of elaborate ritual cycles. The Anu ziggurat underwent major reconstruction during this period, with the addition of multiple terraces, ceremonial staircases, and subsidiary shrines that created a monumental religious landscape visible from great distances. Archaeological excavations in the Anu temple complex have revealed evidence for daily religious activities that involved hundreds of priests, temple servants, and ritual specialists. Cuneiform tablets document the provision of food offerings on a massive scale, including thousands of loaves of bread, hundreds of jars of beer, and dozens of sacrificial animals presented to the deity each day. The economic requirements for maintaining these religious activities necessitated the dedication of vast agricultural estates and craft production facilities to temple operations. The cult of Inanna, goddess of love and warfare, achieved particular prominence during the early dynastic period through association with royal power and military success. The Eanna temple complex dedicated to Inanna became one of the largest religious institutions in the ancient world, covering over 20 hectares and containing dozens of individual buildings. Archaeological evidence shows that the temple controlled extensive commercial operations, including textile production, metalworking, and long-distance trade that generated enormous wealth for religious and political purposes. The integration of religious and political authority during this period created new forms of divine kingship that would influence Mesopotamian political culture for centuries. Royal inscriptions from Uruk described kings as chosen representatives of the gods, responsible for maintaining cosmic order through proper religious observances and just governance. This ideological framework provided religious legitimation for royal authority while creating expectations about kingly behaviour that influenced political decision-making and administrative practices. Temple construction projects during the early dynastic period demonstrate remarkable advances in architectural engineering and artistic decoration. The reconstruction of major religious complexes required the coordination of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons, involving quarrying operations, transportation logistics, and specialized craft production on an unprecedented scale. Archaeological analysis of construction techniques reveals sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, including the use of buttresses, arch construction, and foundation systems designed to support massive superstructures. The artistic decoration of these temple complexes established new standards for monumental art and architectural sculpture. Excavations have uncovered elaborate relief carvings depicting religious ceremonies, mythological scenes, and royal activities executed with remarkable technical skill and artistic sophistication. These sculptural programs required teams of specialized artists working under centralized direction to create coherent decorative schemes that communicated complex religious and political messages to temple visitors. The economic foundation supporting these religious and political developments rested on continued agricultural intensification and craft specialization throughout Uruk's territorial sphere. Archaeological surveys of the surrounding countryside show evidence for expanded irrigation systems, increased settlement density, and specialized agricultural production that generated the surpluses necessary to support large, non-productive populations. The development of new crop varieties and cultivation techniques increased agricultural productivity while reducing labour requirements, freeing workers for construction projects and military service. Craft production during this period achieved new levels of technical sophistication and artistic achievement. Workshops associated with temple and palace complexes produced luxury goods of extraordinary quality, including jewellery, weapons, textiles, and ceremonial objects that demonstrated the highest levels of technical skill. The standardization of production techniques and the development of specialized tools enabled craftsmen to achieve consistent quality while increasing production volumes to meet growing demand from elite patrons and export markets. The magnificent cultural achievements and political dominance that characterized Uruk during the early dynastic period faced an unprecedented challenge around 2334 BC when Sargon of Akkad launched his systematic conquest of the Sumerian city-states. This military campaign represented far more than a simple change of political leadership. It marked the beginning of humanity's first multi-ethnic empire and initiated a complex process of cultural synthesis that would fundamentally transform Mesopotamian civilization. Archaeological evidence from Uruk's destruction layers dating to this period reveals the violent nature of the Acadian conquest, with burned buildings, scattered weapons, and hastily buried treasure hoards indicating fierce resistance by the city's defenders. Sargon's military success against Uruk and other Sumerian cities resulted from innovative tactical approaches and superior organizational capabilities that overcame traditional city-state defensive strategies. Acadian military forces employed composite bows with greater range and penetrating power than traditional Sumerian weapons, enabling archers to engage enemy formations from safer distances. The Acadians also utilized bronze-tipped arrows with improved metallurgy that could penetrate leather and bronze armor more effectively than earlier projectiles. Archaeological excavations at battle sites from this period show concentrations of distinctively Acadian arrowheads alongside damaged Sumerian defensive equipment, providing physical evidence for the technological advantages that contributed to Acadian victory. The siege of Uruk itself appears to have involved sophisticated engineering techniques that overcame the city's formidable defensive walls. Acadian forces constructed earthwork ramps against sections of the fortification system, allowing assault troops to reach the top of defensive structures. Archaeological investigation of the wall foundations shows evidence for systematic undermining operations, where attackers dug tunnels beneath wall sections and then collapsed them by burning wooden support timbers. The discovery of bronze mining tools and charcoal deposits in these tunnel systems confirms the deliberate nature of these siege works. The integration of Uruk into Sargon's expanding empire required administrative innovations that could accommodate the cultural and linguistic diversity of conquered territories while maintaining centralized control from the Acadian capital. Sargon's solution involved a dual administrative system that preserved local Sumerian institutions and religious practices while superimposing Acadian military governors and tax collectors. This approach allowed conquered cities to maintain their traditional identities while ensuring loyalty to imperial authority through a combination of incentives and coercion. Cuneiform tablets from the early Acadian period at Uruk document the systematic transformation of local government structures. Acadian officials assumed control of major administrative functions, including tax collection, military recruitment, and judicial proceedings, while Sumerian priests and traditional civic leaders retained authority over religious ceremonies and local community affairs. This division of responsibilities created a complex but functional system that balanced imperial control with local autonomy, preventing the widespread rebellions that might have resulted from more heavy-handed administrative approaches. The linguistic changes that accompanied Akkadian rule produced one of the most significant cultural transformations in ancient Mesopotamian history. Akkadian, a Semitic language fundamentally different from Sumerian in grammar and vocabulary, gradually became the dominant language for official administration and commercial transactions throughout the empire. However, rather than completely displacing Sumerian, the two languages developed a complex relationship where Sumerian remained the preferred medium for religious and scholarly texts, while Akkadian dominated secular administration and international diplomacy. Archaeological evidence for this linguistic transition appears in the changing character of cuneiform archives at Uruk. Early Akkadian period tablets show a mixture of Sumerian and Akkadian texts, often dealing with the same administrative matters but written in different languages for different audiences. Sumerian continued to be used for communications with temple personnel and traditional community leaders, while Acadian served for correspondence with imperial officials and foreign merchants. This bilingual administrative system required scribal schools to train administrators capable of reading and writing both languages fluently. The religious transformations that occurred under Acadian rule demonstrate the complex process of cultural synthesis that characterized this period. Rather than imposing their own deities and religious practices, Acadian rulers adopted a syncretic approach that incorporated Sumerian gods into their own pantheon, while introducing new religious concepts and ceremonial practices. The result was an enriched religious tradition that combined elements from both cultures in ways that enhanced rather than diminished the spiritual significance of established practices. Archaeological excavations at the Yana Temple complex show evidence for major reconstruction projects undertaken during the early Acadian period. These building campaigns incorporated traditional Sumerian architectural forms with new decorative elements reflecting Akkadian artistic traditions. Relief sculptures from this period depict religious ceremonies that combine Sumerian ritual actions with Akkadian ceremonial dress and symbolic objects. The iconography shows Akkadian rulers participating in traditional Sumerian religious festivals, demonstrating their acceptance of local spiritual traditions while asserting their political authority. The economic integration of Uruk into the Akkadian Empire created new opportunities for commercial expansion while transforming traditional trade relationships. Akkadian control over multiple city-states enabled the creation of standardized weights, measures, and currency systems that facilitated commerce across vast distances. Merchants from Uruk gained access to markets throughout the empire, from the Mediterranean coast to the Iranian plateau, while foreign traders brought exotic goods and new technologies to Mesopotamian cities. Administrative tablets from this period document the expansion of Uruk's commercial networks under imperial protection. Acadian military forces provided security for merchant caravans travelling between distant cities, reducing the risks associated with long-distance trade and enabling the transport of bulk commodities that had previously been uneconomical to ship. The empire's road system, maintained by corvée labour from conquered territories, improved transportation infrastructure and reduced travel times between major commercial centres. The standardisation of commercial practices throughout the empire transformed traditional methods of conducting business. Acadian legal codes established uniform procedures for contracts, dispute resolution, and property rights that applied consistently across different regions and cultural groups. These standardised legal frameworks enabled merchants from different backgrounds to conduct business with confidence, knowing that their agreements would be enforced according to predictable legal principles, regardless of local customs or political relationships. The technological innovations that spread throughout the Acadian Empire during this period enhanced production capabilities and improved living standards in many conquered territories. Acadian metalworkers introduced advanced bronze-working techniques that produced stronger and more durable tools and weapons. Archaeological analysis of bronze artifacts from Acadian period, Uruk, shows improved alloy compositions and more sophisticated casting methods that resulted in products superior to earlier Sumerian metalwork. Agricultural improvements under Acadian rule included the introduction of new irrigation technologies and crop varieties that increased productivity throughout the empire. Acadian engineers developed more efficient water management systems that reduced labour requirements while improving crop yields. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded cultivation areas and new settlement patterns that reflect these technological improvements. The military organisation that maintained Acadian control over conquered territories represented a significant advance over earlier Mesopotamian warfare methods. Professional soldiers replaced the citizen militias that had characterised Sumerian military forces, creating more effective and reliable fighting units. These professional armies received regular training, standardised equipment, and systematic logistical support that enabled them to campaign effectively over long distances and extended periods. Archaeological evidence from Acadian military installations shows sophisticated understanding of fortification design and siege warfare techniques. Military engineers constructed standardised fortress designs that could be adapted to different geographical conditions while maintaining consistent defensive capabilities. These fortifications incorporated advanced features such as overlapping fields of fire, protected water supplies, and underground storage facilities that enabled garrisons to withstand extended sieges. The cultural synthesis that emerged during the later Acadian period produced distinctive artistic styles that combined Sumerian and Acadian aesthetic traditions. Sculpture from this period demonstrates technical innovations in stone carving and bronze casting while maintaining the symbolic and religious significance of traditional Mesopotamian art. The famous victory stele of Naram-Sin, grandson of Sargon, exemplifies this synthetic artistic tradition by depicting the Acadian king in divine regalia while employing compositional techniques derived from Sumerian artistic conventions. The collapse of the Acadian Empire around 2154 BC resulted from a combination of internal rebellions, external invasions, and environmental challenges that overwhelmed the administrative and military capabilities that had maintained imperial unity. Archaeological evidence from Uruk shows destruction layers dating to this period, with burned buildings and scattered artifacts indicating violent conflicts associated with the empire's dissolution. However, the cultural synthesis achieved during 2 centuries of Acadian rule had created lasting changes that would influence Mesopotamian civilization for millennia. The third dynasty of Ur, which emerged as the dominant power in southern Mesopotamia following the Acadian collapse, inherited and further developed the administrative innovations and cultural synthesis of the imperial period. Uruk's integration into this Neo-Sumerian empire around 2112 BC marked another significant transformation in the city's political and cultural development. The Ur-3 rulers, beginning with Ur-Nammu and continuing through 5 successive kings, established an administrative system even more centralized and bureaucratic than their Acadian predecessors. Under Ur-3 administration, Uruk became a crucial provincial centre, responsible for managing agricultural production and craft manufacturing throughout a substantial territorial district. Archaeological excavations have uncovered massive archive collections containing tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets that document the extraordinary administrative complexity of this period. These records reveal a bureaucratic system that tracked individual workers, monitored daily production quotas, and maintained detailed inventories of stored commodities with unprecedented precision. The religious revival that accompanied Ur-3 political dominance restored Sumerian as the primary language for official inscriptions and religious texts, while maintaining Acadian for certain administrative and commercial purposes. This linguistic policy represented a conscious attempt to revive traditional Sumerian cultural values, while incorporating the administrative efficiency and territorial scope achieved during the Acadian period. Temple construction projects at Uruk during this period combined traditional Sumerian architectural forms with improved engineering techniques developed during the imperial era. The ziggurat reconstruction undertaken by Ur-Nammu at Uruk created one of the most impressive religious monuments in ancient Mesopotamia. This massive stepped pyramid, rising approximately 50 meters above the surrounding plain, incorporated advanced construction techniques including fired brick facing, bitumen waterproofing, and sophisticated drainage systems. The project required the coordination of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons and demonstrated the organizational capabilities of the Ur-3 administrative system. Archaeological investigation of the ziggurat construction reveals the systematic planning and resource management that characterized Ur-3 public works projects. Standardized brick sizes and consistent construction techniques indicate centralized production and quality control systems. The transportation of materials from distant quarries and the coordination of specialized craft workers demonstrate logistical capabilities that surpassed even Acadian imperial administration in their complexity and efficiency. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Ur-3 period resulted from intensive agricultural development and expanded craft production under state supervision. Administrative tablets document the systematic cultivation of previously marginal lands through expanded irrigation networks and improved farming techniques. The state-directed economy achieved remarkable productivity levels that supported large non-agricultural populations while generating substantial surpluses for trade and monumental construction. The textile industry at Uruk during this period achieved particular prominence through the production of high-quality woolen fabrics that were traded throughout the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence shows large-scale wool processing installations that employed hundreds of workers in specialized production tasks. The standardization of textile production techniques and quality control measures enabled Uruk workshops to compete effectively in international markets while meeting domestic demand for clothing and ceremonial fabrics. The gradual decline of Ur-3 power during the late 22nd century BC created opportunities for new political forces to establish control over Mesopotamian cities. The Amorite invasions that began around 2000 BC brought Semitic-speaking nomadic groups into direct contact with established urban populations, initiating another phase of cultural synthesis and political transformation. These newcomers established independent kingdoms throughout Mesopotamia, with Babylon eventually emerging as the dominant power under Hammurabi's rule, beginning in 1894 BC. Uruk's incorporation into the Old Babylonian kingdom marked the beginning of the final major phase of the city's ancient history as an independent political entity. Under Babylonian rule, Uruk maintained its religious significance as a major cult centre, while adapting to new administrative systems and cultural influences. The Code of Hammurabi, one of history's most famous legal documents, applied throughout the Babylonian kingdom, including Uruk, and established standardized legal procedures that influenced judicial practices for centuries. The cultural achievements of the Old Babylonian period at Uruk included significant developments in mathematical and astronomical knowledge that built upon earlier Sumerian and Acadian intellectual traditions. Cuneiform tablets from this period contain sophisticated mathematical calculations, astronomical observations, and literary compositions that demonstrate the continued vitality of Mesopotamian scholarly traditions under foreign political control. The transition from Babylonian dominance to the rise of Assyrian power around 911 BC marked another crucial transformation in Uruk's long history, as the city adapted once again to new imperial overlords while maintaining its distinctive cultural identity and religious significance. The Neo-Assyrian Empire's expansion into southern Mesopotamia during the 9th century BC brought Uruk under the control of rulers whose administrative capabilities and military organization surpassed even their Babylonian predecessors. Assyrian kings, beginning with Adad-nirarid II and continuing through the reigns of Tiglath-Pileser III, Sargon II, and Sennacherib, established a provincial system that integrated conquered territories into a unified imperial structure while respecting local traditions and religious practices. Archaeological evidence from Uruk's Assyrian period layers reveals extensive reconstruction projects and administrative reorganization that transformed the city into a crucial regional centre within the imperial framework. The strategic importance of Uruk within the Assyrian administrative system stemmed from its position at the intersection of major trade routes, connecting the Iranian plateau with the Mediterranean coast, and its continued role as a primary cult centre for several important Mesopotamian deities. Assyrian governors established their headquarters in renovated palace complexes that incorporated traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms with distinctively Assyrian decorative elements. Excavations in the administrative quarter have uncovered throne rooms decorated with stone relief panels depicting royal hunting scenes and military victories executed in the characteristic Assyrian artistic style, while maintaining the basic structural layouts favoured by earlier Mesopotamian rulers. The provincial administration imposed by Assyrian authorities created new opportunities for economic development while maintaining the cultural continuity that had characterized Uruk throughout its long history. Assyrian officials implemented standardized taxation systems, improved transportation infrastructure, and established security measures that facilitated long-distance trade throughout the empire. Cuneiform tablets from Assyrian period archives document the systematic collection of tribute payments, the organisation of corvée labour for public works projects, and the coordination of military recruitment that supported imperial campaigns in distant regions. The agricultural reorganisation undertaken by Assyrian administrators enhanced productivity throughout Uruk's territorial district through improved irrigation management and the introduction of new cultivation techniques. Archaeological surveys of the surrounding countryside show evidence for expanded canal networks, new settlement patterns, and intensified cultivation that generated substantial surpluses for imperial taxation and local consumption. The systematic exploitation of marginal lands previously considered unsuitable for agriculture demonstrated the advanced hydraulic engineering capabilities that Assyrian administrators brought to conquered territories. Assyrian military engineers constructed new fortification systems that protected Uruk against potential rebellions and foreign invasions, while serving as bases for imperial forces operating throughout southern Mesopotamia. These defensive installations incorporated advanced siege warfare technologies including overlapping defensive positions, protected water supplies, and underground storage facilities that could sustain garrisons during extended conflicts. Archaeological investigation of these fortifications reveals construction techniques and defensive strategies that reflected centuries of military experience gained through Assyrian campaigns across the ancient Near East. The religious policies implemented by Assyrian rulers demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political importance of maintaining traditional cult practices while asserting imperial authority over conquered populations. Rather than imposing Assyrian religious traditions, imperial administrators adopted syncretic approaches that honoured local deities while incorporating them into broader imperial religious frameworks. The result was an enriched spiritual tradition that satisfied local religious sensibilities while reinforcing political loyalty to Assyrian overlords. Temple reconstruction projects undertaken during the Assyrian period at Uruk combined traditional Mesopotamian religious architecture with improved engineering techniques and enhanced decorative programs. The renovation of the Eanna temple complex involved the construction of new ceremonial chambers, the installation of elaborate drainage systems, and the creation of sculptural programs that depicted both traditional Sumerian religious scenes and contemporary Assyrian royal imagery. These building campaigns required the coordination of hundreds of specialized craftsmen and the importation of materials from throughout the empire, demonstrating the substantial resources that Assyrian authorities devoted to maintaining religious institutions in conquered territories. The cuneiform libraries established at Uruk during the Assyrian period preserved and transmitted the intellectual heritage of earlier Mesopotamian civilizations, while contributing new scholarly achievements in mathematics, astronomy, and literature. Assyrian royal patronage supported scribal schools that trained administrators capable of managing the complex bureaucratic requirements of imperial government while maintaining traditional scholarly disciplines. These educational institutions produced cuneiform tablets containing advanced mathematical treatises, detailed astronomical observations, and literary compositions that built upon centuries of accumulated knowledge. Archaeological excavations in the temple school areas have uncovered extensive tablet collections containing mathematical exercises, astronomical calculations, and literary texts that demonstrate the sophisticated educational curriculum employed during this period. Student exercises show systematic instruction in numerical calculations, geometric principles, and algebraic problem-solving techniques that enabled graduates to handle complex administrative tasks. Advanced mathematical tablets contain solutions to problems involving compound interest, area calculations, and volume measurements that required sophisticated understanding of mathematical principles. The astronomical observations recorded at Uruk during the Assyrian period contributed significantly to the development of systematic celestial studies that would influence scientific traditions throughout the ancient world. Cuneiform tablets document detailed observations of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enabled the creation of accurate calendrical systems and the prediction of celestial events. These astronomical records demonstrate the systematic data collection and analytical methods that characterized Mesopotamian scientific traditions during their most sophisticated phase. The maintenance of Sumerian cultural traditions within the Assyrian imperial framework represented a remarkable achievement in cultural preservation that ensured the continuity of ancient intellectual and religious heritage. Temple schools continued to teach Sumerian language and literature to new generations of priests and scholars, while scribal workshops produced copies of classical texts that preserved traditional knowledge for future transmission. This cultural continuity enabled Uruk to maintain its distinctive identity despite centuries of foreign political control. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Assyrian period resulted from the city's integration into imperial trade networks that connected distant regions of the ancient world. Assyrian military protection enabled merchants to transport goods safely across vast distances, while standardized commercial practices facilitated transactions between traders from different cultural backgrounds. Archaeological evidence shows increased quantities of imported goods, including precious metals, exotic stones, and luxury manufactured items that demonstrate Uruk's participation in international commerce. Craft production at Uruk during this period achieved new levels of technical sophistication through the introduction of improved manufacturing techniques and the availability of raw materials from throughout the Assyrian Empire. Workshops produced high-quality textiles, metalwork and ceramic goods that competed successfully in regional markets while meeting local demand for manufactured products. The standardization of production methods and quality control measures enabled Uruk craftsmen to achieve consistent results while increasing output volumes to meet growing commercial opportunities. The collapse of Assyrian power during the late 7th century BC created opportunities for the emergence of new political forces that would reshape the ancient Near Eastern political landscape. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, established by Nabopolassar in 626 BC and expanded by his successors, inherited much of the former Assyrian territorial domain, while implementing new administrative approaches that emphasize cultural revival and monumental construction projects. Uruk's incorporation into this new imperial system marked the beginning of another significant phase in the city's development. Under Neo-Babylonian rule, Uruk experienced a remarkable religious and cultural revival that restored the city to a position of prominence within Mesopotamian civilization. Nebuchadnezzar II, the most powerful of the Neo-Babylonian rulers, undertook massive construction projects throughout his empire that included extensive renovations and expansions of religious complexes at Uruk. These building campaigns represented conscious attempts to revive traditional Mesopotamian cultural values while demonstrating the wealth and power of the new imperial dynasty. The reconstruction of major temple complexes at Uruk during Nebuchadnezzar's reign involved the most ambitious building projects undertaken at the site since the Ur III period, over a millennium earlier. The renovation of the Anu Ziggurat incorporated advanced engineering techniques that created a structure even more impressive than its predecessors. Archaeological investigation of the construction phases reveals systematic planning and resource management that coordinated the efforts of thousands of workers over multiple construction seasons. The temple reconstruction projects extended beyond mere structural renovation to include comprehensive restoration of religious practices and ceremonial traditions that had been neglected during periods of political instability. Neo-Babylonian rulers invested substantial resources in re-establishing traditional festival cycles, reconstructing ritual equipment, and training new generations of priests capable of maintaining complex ceremonial requirements. These religious revival efforts strengthened popular support for the new dynasty, while reinforcing Uruk's traditional role as a major cult centre. The economic foundation supporting these ambitious construction projects rested on the continued agricultural productivity and expanded commercial relationships that characterized the Neo-Babylonian period. Administrative reforms implemented by Nebuchadnezzar and his successors improved taxation efficiency, enhanced transportation infrastructure, and established security measures that protected commercial activities throughout the empire. Archaeological evidence shows increased settlement density in the Uruk countryside and expanded cultivation areas that generated substantial agricultural surpluses. The international trade relationships that flourished during the Neo-Babylonian period connected Uruk with commercial networks extending from the Mediterranean coast to the Indian Ocean. Babylonian merchants established trading posts in distant cities, while foreign traders brought exotic goods and new technologies to Mesopotamian markets. Cuneiform tablets document complex commercial transactions involving precious metals, luxury manufactured goods, and bulk commodities that demonstrate the sophisticated financial instruments and legal frameworks that supported long-distance trade. The scholarly achievements and monumental construction projects that characterized Uruk during the Neo-Babylonian period came to an abrupt end with the arrival of Cyrus the Great's Persian forces in 539 BC. Unlike previous conquests that had devastated the city through prolonged sieges and violent destruction, the Persian takeover of Uruk occurred with remarkable efficiency and minimal physical damage to the urban infrastructure. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period shows no significant destruction layers or burned buildings, indicating that the city's surrender was negotiated rather than forced through military assault. Cuneiform tablets dating to the final months of Babylonian rule document the systematic withdrawal of Neo-Babylonian administrators and the peaceful transfer of authority to Persian officials, suggesting that local leaders had recognized the futility of resistance against Cyrus's expanding empire. The administrative integration of Uruk into the Achaemenid Persian Empire represented a masterpiece of imperial organization that balanced centralized control with respect for local traditions and autonomous governance structures. Cyrus's conquest strategy, later codified in the famous Cyrus Cylinder, explicitly guaranteed the preservation of local religious practices, cultural institutions, and traditional administrative arrangements within conquered territories. This policy of cultural tolerance proved particularly effective at Uruk, where centuries of foreign rule had created sophisticated mechanisms for adapting to new political overlords while maintaining essential aspects of Mesopotamian identity. The Persian satrap system implemented throughout the Achaemenid Empire divided vast territorial domains into manageable administrative units governed by appointed officials responsible directly to the Persian king. Uruk became part of the extensive satrapy of Babylonia, which encompassed most of southern Mesopotamia and portions of the Iranian plateau. The satrap appointed to govern this crucial region typically held the rank of Persian noble and commanded substantial military forces, but operated within policy frameworks that emphasized cooperation with local elites, rather than direct administrative control over daily governance activities. Archaeological excavations in Uruk's administrative quarter have uncovered evidence for the systematic renovation of governmental buildings during the early Persian period. Persian architects and engineers modified existing palace complexes to accommodate new administrative requirements while preserving the basic structural arrangements that had served Mesopotamian rulers for centuries. The most significant changes involved the construction of new audience chambers designed according to Persian ceremonial protocols, featuring raised platforms for royal representatives and elaborate decorative programs that combine traditional Mesopotamian artistic motifs with distinctively Persian symbolic elements. The Persian administrative compound, constructed adjacent to the traditional palace area, incorporated architectural features characteristic of Achaemenid governmental buildings throughout the empire. Excavations have revealed a rectangular complex measuring approximately 150 by 200 meters, surrounded by high walls and entered through a single monumental gateway decorated with glazed brick reliefs depicting Persian royal imagery. The interior layout featured a central courtyard surrounded by administrative offices, residential quarters for Persian officials, and storage facilities for tax collection and record keeping. The most impressive architectural element within this Persian administrative complex was the Apadana, or audience hall, constructed according to standardized designs employed throughout the Achaemenid Empire. This massive hypostyle hall measured 60 by 40 meters and featured 36 stone columns supporting a cedar beam roof system imported from Lebanese mountains. The columns, carved from local limestone but following Persian artistic conventions, incorporated distinctive bell-shaped capitals decorated with stylized animal figures including bulls, lions and eagles that symbolized imperial power and divine protection. The integration of Persian administrative personnel with existing Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures created a dual governmental system that maximized administrative efficiency while maintaining political stability. Persian officials assumed responsibility for military affairs, tax collection, and communication with the imperial court at Persepolis. while traditional Mesopotamian administrators continued to manage local judicial proceedings, religious ceremonies, and community affairs. This division of responsibilities prevented conflicts between imperial requirements and local customs, while ensuring that Persian interests received appropriate attention from competent officials familiar with regional conditions. Cuneiform archives from the Persian period at Uruk document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate Persian administrative requirements. Scribal schools modified their curricula to include instruction in Aramaic, the official administrative language of the Persian Empire, while maintaining traditional training in Acadian and Sumerian for local governmental and religious purposes. Bilingual tablets from this period show Persian tax assessments recorded in Aramaic alongside traditional Mesopotamian legal documents written in Acadian, demonstrating the practical accommodation between imperial and local administrative traditions. The Persian taxation system implemented at Uruk represented a significant departure from earlier Mesopotamian fiscal practices through its emphasis on monetary payments rather than tribute in kind. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of new mint facilities where silver coins were produced according to Persian weight standards and bearing imperial imagery. These coins, known as sigloi, featured the image of the Persian king on one side and symbolic representations of Ahura Mazda, the chief deity of the Persian religious system, on the reverse. The introduction of standardized coinage facilitated commercial transactions throughout the empire while providing Persian authorities with convenient methods for collecting and transporting tax revenues. The agricultural administration of Uruk's territorial district under Persian rule involved systematic surveys of cultivated lands and the establishment of standardized assessment procedures that determined tax obligations based on agricultural productivity. Persian surveyors, working in cooperation with local officials familiar with traditional irrigation systems and cultivation patterns, created detailed cadastral records that documented property boundaries, water rights, and crop yields for individual agricultural holdings. These surveys, recorded on cuneiform tablets using both Aramaic and Acadian scripts, provided the foundation for equitable taxation while protecting traditional property rights. Archaeological investigation of Persian period irrigation systems shows evidence for significant improvements in water management technology that increased agricultural productivity throughout the Uruk region. Persian engineers introduced new canal construction techniques that reduced water loss through seepage and improved the reliability of water delivery to distant agricultural areas. The construction of stone-lined channels and the installation of bronze sluice gates enabled more precise control of water distribution, while improved maintenance procedures ensured the long-term functionality of irrigation infrastructure. The religious tolerance that characterized Persian imperial policy found particularly favorable expression at Uruk, where traditional Mesopotamian cult practices continued without interruption under Persian rule. The Yana temple complex dedicated to Inanna maintained its traditional ceremonial cycles, priestly hierarchies, and property holdings under Persian protection. Archaeological evidence shows continued temple construction and renovation projects during the Persian period, indicating that religious institutions retained access to substantial financial resources and enjoyed official support from imperial authorities. Persian religious policy at Uruk involved the careful integration of traditional Mesopotamian deities into broader imperial religious frameworks without compromising the essential characteristics of local spiritual traditions. The Persian concept of religious pluralism derived from Zoroastrian theological principles that recognize the validity of different paths to divine truth, provided ideological justification for supporting local cult practices while maintaining imperial unity. This approach proved particularly effective in Mesopotamia, where religious diversity had been a characteristic feature of urban civilization for millennia. The reconstruction of the Anu Ziggurat during the Persian period represents one of the most ambitious temple construction projects undertaken at Uruk since the Neo-Babylonian era. Persian authorities provided substantial financial support for this massive undertaking, which involved the complete rebuilding of the stepped pyramid structure using improved engineering techniques and higher quality materials. Archaeological investigation of the construction phases reveals the systematic planning and resource management that characterized Persian public works projects throughout the empire. The ziggurat reconstruction incorporated architectural innovations that reflected Persian engineering capabilities while maintaining the traditional Mesopotamian, symbolic and religious significance of the structure. The foundation system employed large stone blocks quarried from distant mountainous regions and transported to Uruk via the extensive Persian road network. The superstructure combined traditional mud brick construction with fired brick facing and bitumen waterproofing that provided enhanced durability and weather resistance. The completed structure rose approximately 60 metres above the surrounding plain and featured elaborate staircases, ceremonial chambers, and decorative elements that demonstrated the wealth and technical capabilities available to Persian-sponsored construction projects. The Persian period at Uruk witnessed significant developments in craft production and manufacturing that reflected both imperial economic policies and local technological innovations. Persian authorities encouraged the expansion of textile production through the introduction of new weaving techniques and the importation of raw materials from distant regions of the empire. Archaeological excavations in workshop areas have uncovered evidence for large-scale wool and linen processing facilities that employed hundreds of workers in specialized production tasks. The standardization of manufacturing techniques under Persian administration enabled Uruk craftsmen to compete effectively in imperial markets while meeting growing demand for high-quality manufactured goods. Persian quality control measures and standardized measurement systems ensured consistent product characteristics, while improved transportation infrastructure reduced the costs of distributing finished goods to distant markets. Cuneiform tablets document export contracts for Uruk textiles, metalwork and ceramic products destined for markets throughout the Persian Empire, from Egypt to Central Asia. The metalworking industry at Uruk during the Persian period achieved particular prominence through the production of bronze and iron implements that incorporated advanced Persian metallurgical techniques. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows improved alloy compositions and sophisticated manufacturing processes that produced tools and weapons superior to earlier Mesopotamian metalwork. The introduction of iron working technology, previously limited in Mesopotamian contexts, enabled the production of agricultural implements and construction tools that enhance productivity in various economic sectors. Persian period archaeological deposits at Uruk contain substantial quantities of imported goods that demonstrate the city's integration into imperial trade networks spanning 3 continents. Excavations have uncovered Persian luxury items including carved stone vessels, precious metal jewellery, and silk textiles that arrived via trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Central Asia and the Far East. Egyptian artifacts including faience objects, carved stone amulets, and papyrus documents indicate commercial relationships with the Nile Valley, while Indian materials such as ivory carvings and precious stones demonstrate connections with South Asian markets. The educational institutions that flourished at Uruk during the Persian period combine traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines with new intellectual currents introduced through imperial cultural exchange. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include instruction in Persian literature, Zoroastrian religious texts, and administrative practices employed throughout the empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered tablet collections containing Persian royal inscriptions, Zoroastrian prayers, and administrative handbooks that supplemented traditional Mesopotamian educational materials. The mathematical and astronomical achievements of Persian period scholars at Uruk built upon centuries of accumulated Mesopotamian knowledge, while incorporating new observational data and computational techniques developed throughout the empire. Cuneiform tablets from this period contained sophisticated astronomical calculations that enabled accurate prediction of celestial events and the creation of reliable calendrical systems. These scholarly achievements contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that would influence scientific traditions throughout the Hellenistic world. The legal system that operated at Uruk under Persian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with imperial legal codes that applied throughout the Achaemenid Empire. Persian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests, interstate disputes, and conflicts between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds, while traditional Mesopotamian legal institutions continued to manage local civil and criminal matters. This dual legal system provided comprehensive judicial coverage while respecting established legal traditions and community customs. Archaeological evidence from Persian period legal archives shows the systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas and procedures. These records demonstrate the sophisticated legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the complex multi-ethnic environment of the Persian Empire. The preservation of traditional Mesopotamian legal concepts alongside Persian imperial law created flexible judicial systems that could accommodate diverse cultural expectations while maintaining consistent standards of justice. The urban development that occurred at Uruk during the Persian period reflected both imperial investment in infrastructure improvements and continued population growth that required expanded residential and commercial facilities. Archaeological surveys show evidence for new residential districts constructed according to planned layouts that incorporated Persian urban design principles while maintaining traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms. These new neighbourhoods featured improved drainage systems, wider streets, and standardized building plots that enhanced living conditions while accommodating increased population density. The commercial quarter of Persian period Uruk expanded significantly through the construction of new market facilities, warehouse complexes, and workshop areas that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, large storage buildings with sophisticated inventory management systems, and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments demonstrate the economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during its integration into the Persian imperial system. The Persian road system that connected Uruk with other major cities throughout the empire facilitated unprecedented levels of communication and transportation that transformed the city's relationships with distant regions. The famous Royal Road, which extended from Sardis in western Anatolia to Susa in southwestern Iran, passed through Mesopotamia and provided Uruk with direct access to imperial communication networks. Archaeological investigation of road construction techniques reveals sophisticated engineering approaches that created durable transportation infrastructure capable of supporting heavy commercial traffic and rapid military movement. The postal system established by Persian authorities enabled regular communication between Uruk and the imperial capital at Persepolis, facilitating coordination of administrative activities and ensuring that local developments received appropriate attention from central authorities. Cuneiform tablets document the systematic transmission of governmental correspondence, commercial information, and intelligence reports that maintained effective imperial control while respecting local autonomy. This communication system represented one of the most advanced information networks in the ancient world and contributed significantly to the administrative efficiency of the Persian Empire. The sophisticated communication networks and administrative efficiency that characterized Persian rule at Uruk faced unprecedented challenges when Alexander the Great's Macedonian forces crossed the Hellespont in 334 BC, initiating a campaign that would fundamentally transform the political and cultural landscape of the ancient Near East. The news of Alexander's victories at Granicus and Issus reached Uruk through the Persian postal system months before the Macedonian army approached Mesopotamia, providing local administrators with sufficient time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation between Persian imperial forces and the advancing Greek coalition. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought on October 1st, 331 BC, approximately 100 kilometers north of Uruk, marked the decisive moment when Persian control over Mesopotamia collapsed under Alexander's tactical brilliance and the superior discipline of Macedonian military formations. Archaeological evidence from battlefield surveys conducted in the 20th century has uncovered scattered weapons, armour fragments, and horse equipment that provide physical testimony to the scale and intensity of this pivotal engagement. Persian forces under Darius III, despite their numerical superiority and advantageous defensive positioning, proved unable to counter the coordinated assault of Macedonian phalanxes supported by Thessalian cavalry and allied Greek contingents. The immediate aftermath of Gaugamela created a power vacuum throughout southern Mesopotamia that Alexander filled through a combination of diplomatic negotiation and strategic occupation of key urban centres. Uruk's surrender to Macedonian forces occurred without significant resistance, as local leaders recognised the futility of opposing an army that had just destroyed the Persian Empire's primary military force. Cuneiform tablets from this transitional period document the systematic transfer of administrative authority from Persian officials to Macedonian military governors, indicating that the changeover proceeded according to established protocols rather than through violent conquest. Alexander's personal visit to Uruk in late 331 BC demonstrated his sophisticated understanding of Mesopotamian political traditions and religious practices. Unlike previous conquerors who had imposed foreign administrative systems, Alexander adopted a syncretic approach that combined Macedonian military authority with traditional Mesopotamian governmental structures. Archaeological excavations in the palace quarter have uncovered evidence for hasty renovations undertaken to accommodate Alexander's entourage, including the construction of new reception halls designed according to Macedonian court protocols, while maintaining the basic architectural arrangements that had served earlier rulers. The religious policies implemented by Alexander at Uruk reflected his broader strategy of legitimizing Macedonian rule through adoption of local spiritual traditions and ceremonial practices. Rather than suppressing traditional Mesopotamian cult activities, Alexander participated in established religious festivals and provided financial support for temple maintenance and construction projects. The famous scene of Alexander's sacrifice to Marduk at Babylon was replicated at Uruk, with appropriate ceremonies honouring Anu and Inanna, demonstrating the conqueror's recognition of religious authority as a crucial component of political legitimacy. The death of Alexander in Babylon in 323 BC initiated a period of political fragmentation that ultimately resulted in the establishment of Seleucid control over Mesopotamia under Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's most capable generals and successors. The Wars of the Diadochi, which consumed the eastern Mediterranean and Near East for over 2 decades following Alexander's death, had profound implications for Uruk's development as competing Macedonian commanders struggled to establish permanent control over the wealthy Mesopotamian territories. Seleucus's consolidation of power in Mesopotamia around 305 BC marked the beginning of a new phase in Uruk's history, characterized by systematic Hellenization, combined with preservation of essential Mesopotamian cultural traditions. The Seleucid administrative system established at Uruk incorporated Greek governmental concepts and personnel while maintaining traditional Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures that had proven effective under previous imperial regimes. This dual administrative approach enabled efficient governance while preventing the cultural conflicts that might have resulted from more radical political transformation. The establishment of Greek colonies throughout the Seleucid Empire brought substantial numbers of Greek-speaking settlers to Mesopotamia, fundamentally altering the demographic composition of major urban centres including Uruk. Archaeological evidence from residential districts shows the construction of new housing complexes designed according to Greek architectural principles, featuring central courtyards surrounded by rooms arranged according to Hellenistic domestic arrangements. These Greek residential areas were typically located in separate districts from traditional Mesopotamian neighbourhoods, creating ethnically distinct communities within the larger urban framework. The Greek settlers who arrived at Uruk during the early Seleucid period included military veterans granted land holdings in recognition of their service, skilled craftsmen attracted by economic opportunities, and administrative personnel appointed to governmental positions. Cuneiform and Greek inscriptions from this period document the systematic distribution of agricultural estates to Greek colonists, the establishment of Greek craft workshops, and the creation of educational institutions that provided instruction in Greek language and culture for both immigrant and indigenous populations. The architectural transformation of Uruk under Seleucid rule involved the construction of distinctively Greek public buildings that served new social and cultural functions within the traditional Mesopotamian urban environment. The most significant of these projects was the gymnasium, a massive complex measuring approximately 200 by 150 metres that provided facilities for athletic training, educational activities, and social gatherings according to established Greek cultural practices. Archaeological excavations have revealed a sophisticated architectural program that included exercise areas, bathing facilities, lecture halls, and library spaces designed to serve the Greek community's cultural and educational needs. The gymnasium complex incorporated advanced engineering techniques that demonstrated Greek expertise in hydraulic systems and structural design. The bathing facilities featured elaborate hot and cold water systems supplied by aqueducts that brought fresh water from distant sources, while sophisticated drainage networks removed wastewater and maintained sanitary conditions. The exercise areas included a standard running track, wrestling grounds, and equipment storage facilities that enabled the full range of athletic activities characteristic of Greek gymnasium culture. The construction of a Greek theatre at Uruk represented another significant addition to the city's architectural landscape, providing a venue for dramatic performances and public assemblies according to Hellenistic cultural traditions. The theatre, carved into a natural hillside adjacent to the main urban area, featured a semicircular seating arrangement that could accommodate approximately 5,000 spectators. The stage area incorporated sophisticated acoustic design principles that ensured clear sound transmission throughout the seating area, while elaborate decorative programs featured Greek mythological themes executed by skilled sculptors and painters. The educational institutions established at Uruk during the Seleucid period created systematic programs for transmitting Greek cultural knowledge while preserving traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines. The gymnasium school provided instruction in Greek literature, philosophy, mathematics, and rhetoric for students from both Greek and indigenous backgrounds. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive collections of Greek literary texts, philosophical treatises, and scientific works that demonstrate the comprehensive curriculum employed in these institutions. The preservation of traditional Mesopotamian educational traditions alongside Greek instruction created a unique intellectual environment that fostered cultural synthesis and scholarly innovation. Temple schools continue to provide training in cuneiform writing, traditional mathematical techniques, and Mesopotamian religious literature, while also offering instruction in Greek language and Hellenistic scholarly methods. This educational diversity enabled students to master both cultural traditions and contributed to the development of synthetic intellectual approaches that combined Greek and Mesopotamian knowledge systems. The economic integration of Uruk into Mediterranean trade networks under Seleucid rule transformed traditional commercial relationships and created new opportunities for economic development. Greek merchants established trading partnerships with Mesopotamian counterparts, facilitating the exchange of goods between the eastern Mediterranean and the Iranian plateau. Archaeological evidence shows increased quantities of Greek manufactured goods, including pottery, metalwork, and luxury items, alongside continued production and export of traditional Mesopotamian products such as textiles, agricultural commodities, and craft goods. The introduction of Greek commercial practices and legal frameworks enhanced the efficiency of long-distance trade, while providing standardized procedures for conducting business across cultural boundaries. Greek contract law, with its emphasis on written agreements and standardized dispute resolution procedures, complemented traditional Mesopotamian commercial customs and created comprehensive legal frameworks for complex transactions. Bilingual contracts written in both Greek and Aramaic demonstrate the practical accommodation between different legal traditions and commercial practices. The monetary system implemented throughout the Seleucid Empire standardized currency values and facilitated commercial transactions across vast distances. Silver coins minted at Uruk during this period featured Greek artistic styles and inscriptions, while incorporating traditional Mesopotamian symbolic elements that maintained cultural continuity. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency systems enabled merchants to conduct business with confidence throughout the empire, while reducing transaction costs and commercial uncertainties. The religious synthesis that developed at Uruk under Seleucid rule created distinctive theological traditions that combined Greek philosophical concepts with traditional Mesopotamian spiritual practices. The identification of Greek deities with Mesopotamian gods facilitated religious accommodation while preserving the essential characteristics of both traditions. Anu became associated with Zeus as the supreme sky deity, while Inanna was identified with Aphrodite as the goddess of love and fertility, creating theological frameworks that satisfied both Greek and Mesopotamian religious sensibilities. The temple construction projects undertaken during the Seleucid period incorporated Greek architectural elements into traditional Mesopotamian religious structures, creating distinctive synthetic building styles. The renovation of the Iana temple complex included the addition of Greek-style columns, decorative friezes featuring classical mythological themes, and improved lighting systems that enhanced the visual impact of religious ceremonies. These architectural modifications demonstrated respect for traditional religious functions, while introducing aesthetic innovations that appealed to Greek cultural preferences. The gradual decline of cuneiform literacy during the Seleucid period reflected broader cultural changes that accompanied Hellenization, while preserving essential aspects of Mesopotamian intellectual traditions. Greek alphabetic writing systems proved more efficient for many administrative and commercial purposes, leading to the gradual replacement of cuneiform for routine record-keeping activities. However, cuneiform continued to be employed for religious texts, scholarly works, and traditional legal documents, ensuring the preservation of ancient knowledge systems within specialized intellectual communities. The astronomical and mathematical achievements of Seleucid period scholars at Uruk represented the culmination of centuries of Mesopotamian scientific development, enhanced by Greek theoretical approaches and observational techniques. The combination of traditional Mesopotamian computational methods with Greek geometric principles produced sophisticated mathematical models that enabled accurate prediction of celestial phenomena and the creation of precise calendrical systems. These scientific achievements contributed to the development of Hellenistic astronomy and mathematics that would influence scholarly traditions throughout the Mediterranean world. The urban planning initiatives undertaken at Uruk during the Seleucid period created new residential and commercial districts that accommodated growing populations while maintaining the essential character of the traditional Mesopotamian city. Greek urban design principles, emphasizing geometric street layouts and standardized building plots, were adapted to local environmental conditions and cultural preferences. The result was a distinctive urban landscape that combined Hellenistic planning concepts with traditional Mesopotamian architectural forms and spatial arrangements. The demographic changes that occurred at Uruk during the Seleucid period created a cosmopolitan urban environment that included substantial populations of Greeks, Mesopotamians, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire. Marriage relationships between Greek settlers and indigenous inhabitants produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between different ethnic communities. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined Greek and Mesopotamian traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities among these mixed populations. The military installations that secured Seleucid authority throughout Mesopotamia underwent systematic reorganization when Parthian forces under Mithridates I crossed the Zagros Mountains in 141 BC, initiating a campaign that would permanently alter the political landscape of the Iranian Plateau and Mesopotamia. The Parthian conquest of Uruk occurred not through a single decisive battle but through a gradual process of territorial acquisition that exploited Seleucid military weaknesses and administrative instability. Archaeological evidence from destruction layers dating to this period shows limited physical damage to urban infrastructure, suggesting that Uruk's surrender followed negotiated terms rather than prolonged siege warfare. The Arsacid dynasty's approach to governing conquered territories differed significantly from earlier imperial systems through its emphasis on decentralized administration and cultural accommodation. Parthian rulers, themselves originally nomadic peoples from the Iranian steppes, possessed sophisticated understanding of the challenges involved in governing sedentary agricultural populations with established urban traditions. Rather than imposing uniform administrative structures throughout their expanding empire, Parthian authorities adapted their governmental methods to local conditions while maintaining strategic control over military affairs and taxation systems. The establishment of Parthian administration at Uruk involved the appointment of local governors who combined traditional Mesopotamian administrative experience with loyalty to Arsacid political objectives. These officials, typically drawn from established urban elites who had demonstrated competence under previous regimes, maintained existing bureaucratic procedures while implementing new policies that reflected Parthian strategic priorities. Cuneiform tablets from early Parthian period archives document the systematic adaptation of Seleucid administrative practices to accommodate Parthian governmental requirements, indicating continuity in routine administrative functions despite fundamental changes in political authority. The strategic importance of Uruk within the Parthian Empire stemmed from its position along crucial trade routes, connecting the Iranian plateau with Mesopotamian agricultural regions and its continued significance as a major religious centre. Parthian military engineers constructed new fortification systems that integrated the city into broader defensive networks designed to protect against Roman expansion eastward. These fortifications incorporated advanced siege warfare technologies including overlapping defensive positions, underground water supplies, and communication systems that enabled coordination with other Parthian strongholds throughout the region. Archaeological investigations of Parthian period fortifications reveal construction techniques that combined Iranian military engineering traditions with adaptations to local environmental conditions. The main defensive walls surrounding Uruk measured approximately 12 kilometers in circumference and incorporated both natural topographical features and artificial earthworks to create comprehensive protective barriers. Stone foundations supported mud brick superstructures reinforced with timber frameworks, while projecting bastions provided platforms for defensive artillery and archer positions that could engage attackers at extended ranges. Economic integration of Uruk into Parthian commercial networks created unprecedented opportunities for long-distance trade while maintaining traditional agricultural and craft production systems. Parthian control over the Silk Road trade routes that connected China with Mediterranean markets enabled Uruk merchants to participate in lucrative commercial relationships extending across 3 continents. Archaeological deposits from this period contain substantial quantities of Chinese silk, Indian precious stones, and Roman manufactured goods alongside traditional Mesopotamian products, demonstrating the city's integration into international trade networks of extraordinary geographical scope. The Parthian period witnessed significant developments in craft production that reflected both technological innovations and changing market demands. Metalworking shops at Uruk adopted new techniques for producing steel implements and weapons that incorporated Iranian metallurgical knowledge with traditional Mesopotamian manufacturing methods. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows improved alloy compositions and sophisticated heat treatment processes that produce tools and weapons superior to earlier products. The standardization of manufacturing techniques enabled Uruk craftsmen to compete effectively in imperial markets while meeting growing demand for high-quality manufactured goods. Textile production during the Parthian period achieved particular prominence through the development of new weaving techniques and the introduction of exotic raw materials from distant regions. Workshops produced silk fabrics using techniques learned from Chinese artisans, while traditional wool and linen production continued to supply local and regional markets. Archaeological excavations in textile production areas have uncovered sophisticated dyeing installations that processed imported colorants, including Indian indigo, Phoenician purple, and various mineral pigments that created textiles of exceptional beauty and commercial value. The religious policies implemented by Parthian authorities at Uruk demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the political importance of maintaining traditional cult practices while accommodating new spiritual influences from Iranian religious traditions. Zoroastrian concepts gradually influenced Mesopotamian theological development without displacing established deities or ceremonial practices. The result was a syncretic religious environment that satisfied traditional spiritual needs while incorporating new theological concepts that enhanced rather than contradicted existing belief systems. Temple construction projects undertaken during the Parthian period combined traditional Mesopotamian religious architecture with Iranian decorative elements and improved engineering techniques. The renovation of major temple complexes involved the installation of fire altars for Zoroastrian ceremonial purposes, alongside traditional Mesopotamian ritual equipment. Archaeological evidence shows careful integration of different religious traditions that created comprehensive spiritual environments capable of serving diverse religious communities within the same architectural frameworks. The Aana temple complex underwent extensive modification during the early Parthian period to accommodate new ceremonial requirements while preserving traditional religious functions. Iranian architects introduced distinctive decorative programs featuring stylized animal motifs, geometric patterns, and symbolic representations of light and darkness that reflected Zoroastrian theological concepts. These decorative elements were integrated with traditional Mesopotamian religious imagery to create comprehensive artistic programs that communicated complex theological messages to worshippers from different cultural backgrounds. The educational institutions that flourished at Uruk during the Parthian period combined Mesopotamian scholarly traditions with Iranian intellectual developments and residual Greek educational practices inherited from the Seleucid era. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include instruction in Middle Persian language and literature, while maintaining traditional training in cuneiform writing and Mesopotamian religious texts. This multilingual educational environment produced scholars capable of serving administrative, religious, and commercial functions within the complex cultural landscape of the Parthian Empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive tablet collections containing mathematical exercises, astronomical observations, and literary compositions that demonstrate the continued vitality of Mesopotamian intellectual traditions under Parthian rule. Advanced mathematical texts show sophisticated computational techniques that enabled accurate calculation of compound interest, geometric measurements, and astronomical predictions. These scholarly achievements contributed to the preservation and transmission of ancient knowledge systems while facilitating practical applications in commercial, agricultural, and administrative contexts. The astronomical observations conducted at Uruk during the Parthian period built upon centuries of accumulated Mesopotamian scientific knowledge, while incorporating new observational techniques and theoretical frameworks developed throughout the empire. Parthian astronomers maintained detailed records of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enabled the creation of accurate calendrical systems and the prediction of celestial events. These scientific activities contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that influenced scholarly traditions throughout the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. Cuneiform tablets from Parthian period astronomical archives contained sophisticated mathematical models that enabled precise calculation of planetary positions and the timing of eclipses. These computational techniques represented the culmination of Mesopotamian mathematical astronomy and demonstrated the continued intellectual vitality of traditional scholarly disciplines under foreign political control. The systematic collection and analysis of observational data created comprehensive databases that supported both practical applications and theoretical investigations of celestial phenomena. The legal system that operated at Uruk under Parthian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with Iranian legal concepts and residual Greek legal practices inherited from the Seleucid period. Parthian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests and disputes between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds, while traditional Mesopotamian legal institutions continued to manage local civil and criminal matters. This complex legal environment required sophisticated understanding of multiple legal traditions and created opportunities for legal innovation and synthesis. Archaeological evidence from Parthian period legal archives shows the systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas that accommodated diverse cultural expectations. These records demonstrate the flexible legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the multi-ethnic environment of the Parthian Empire. The preservation of traditional legal concepts alongside Iranian and Greek legal principles created comprehensive judicial systems that could address complex legal situations involving multiple cultural traditions. The urban development that occurred at Uruk during the Parthian period reflected both imperial investment in infrastructure improvements and continued population growth that required expanded residential and commercial facilities. New residential districts constructed during this period incorporated Iranian architectural elements, including distinctive window arrangements, improved ventilation systems, and decorative programs that reflected Persian aesthetic preferences. These neighborhoods featured planned layouts with standardized building plots and improved drainage systems that enhanced living conditions while accommodating increased population density. The commercial quarter of Parthian period Uruk expanded significantly through the construction of new market facilities, warehouse complexes, and workshop areas that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, large storage buildings with sophisticated inventory management systems, and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments demonstrate the economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during its integration into Parthian trade networks. The demographic composition of Parthian period Uruk included substantial populations of Iranians, Greeks, Mesopotamians, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire, creating a cosmopolitan urban environment that fostered cultural exchange and innovation. marriage relationships between different ethnic communities produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between diverse groups. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined elements from multiple cultural traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities among these mixed populations. The agricultural administration of Uruk's territorial district under Parthian rule involved systematic improvements to irrigation infrastructure and the introduction of new cultivation techniques that increased productivity throughout the region. Parthian engineers constructed new canal systems that incorporated Iranian hydraulic technologies with traditional Mesopotamian water management methods. These improvements enable the cultivation of previously marginal lands while reducing labour requirements and improving crop yields through more efficient water distribution systems. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded settlement patterns and intensified agricultural production that supported growing urban populations, while generating substantial surpluses for trade and taxation. New agricultural techniques included the introduction of Iranian crop varieties, improved ploughing methods, and systematic crop rotation systems that maintained soil fertility while maximizing productivity. These innovations contributed to the economic prosperity that characterized the Parthian period at Uruk. The military organization that maintained Parthian control over Uruk and surrounding territories combined traditional Iranian cavalry tactics with infantry formations adapted to local conditions and strategic requirements. Parthian heavy cavalry, equipped with scale armour and long lances, provided the primary striking force for major military operations, while light cavalry units conducted reconnaissance and harassment activities. Infantry forces recruited from local populations contributed specialized skills and regional knowledge that enhanced overall military effectiveness. Archaeological excavations at military installations have uncovered weapons, armour, and equipment that demonstrate the systematic integration of Iranian and Mesopotamian military technologies. Parthian metalworkers produced composite bows with superior range and penetrating power compared to earlier weapons, while traditional Mesopotamian armour-making techniques were enhanced through the introduction of Iranian metallurgical innovations. The combination of different military traditions created effective fighting forces capable of defending Parthian territories against both internal rebellions and external threats. The frontier position of Uruk between Roman and Parthian spheres of influence created ongoing military tensions that required constant vigilance and substantial defensive preparations. Roman expansion eastward under Trajan and later emperors brought Roman legions into direct contact with Parthian forces along the Euphrates River, creating a militarized border zone that affected all aspects of life in Mesopotamian cities. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of new fortifications, the expansion of military installations, and the implementation of early warning systems that enabled rapid response to potential Roman invasions. The cultural synthesis that emerged at Uruk during the Parthian period created distinctive artistic traditions that combined Mesopotamian, Iranian, and Greek aesthetic elements in innovative ways. Sculpture from this period demonstrates technical innovations in stone carving and bronze casting, while maintaining symbolic and religious significance derived from multiple cultural traditions. Relief panels decorating public buildings featured complex iconographic programs that communicated political and religious messages to diverse audiences using visual languages derived from different cultural sources. The artistic innovations and cultural synthesis that characterized Uruk during the later Parthian period provided the foundation for an extraordinary renaissance. When Ardashir I established the Sassanian Empire in 224 AD, overthrowing the last Arsacid rulers and initiating what would become the final major phase of ancient Mesopotamian urban civilization. The Sassanian conquest of Uruk occurred through systematic military campaigns that combined traditional Iranian cavalry tactics with improved siege warfare techniques, enabling Ardashir's forces to capture fortified cities more efficiently than their Parthian predecessors. Archaeological evidence from transition layers shows minimal destruction during the changeover, indicating that Uruk's surrender followed negotiated agreements rather than prolonged resistance, as local administrators recognized the superior organization and resources of the emerging Sassanian state. The administrative integration of Uruk into the Sassanian Empire represented a masterpiece of imperial organization that surpassed even Persian Achaemenid governmental efficiency through systematic bureaucratic reforms and improved communication networks. Sassanian rulers established a hierarchical administrative system that divided the empire into 4 major regions, with Uruk becoming a crucial provincial centre within Mesopotamia's administrative district. The appointment of provincial governors combined Iranian noble lineage with demonstrated administrative competence, creating governmental structures that balanced imperial control with local autonomy while maintaining consistent policy implementation throughout the empire. Archaeological excavations in Uruk's administrative quarter have uncovered evidence for comprehensive renovation projects undertaken during the early Sassanian period that transformed governmental facilities according to new imperial standards. Sassanian architects constructed a massive palace complex measuring approximately 300 by 200 metres, featuring distinctive architectural elements including barrel-vaulted reception halls, elaborate stucco decorations, and sophisticated heating systems that demonstrated advanced engineering capabilities. The complex incorporated traditional Mesopotamian spatial arrangements with Iranian architectural innovations, creating functional governmental facilities that accommodated both imperial ceremonies and routine administrative activities. The most impressive architectural achievement within this Sassanian administrative complex was the construction of an audience hall designed according to imperial protocols established at Ctesiphon, the Sassanian capital. This massive hypostyle structure measured 80 by 60 metres and featured a soaring barrel vault supported by massive brick pillars decorated with carved stucco reliefs depicting royal hunting scenes and divine investiture ceremonies. The interior surfaces were covered with polychrome paintings executed in the distinctive Sassanian artistic style, featuring geometric patterns, stylized animal motifs, and symbolic representations of royal authority that communicated imperial ideology to visitors from throughout the province. The integration of Sassanian administrative personnel with existing Mesopotamian bureaucratic structures created unprecedented levels of governmental efficiency while preserving traditional local administrative practices that had proven effective over centuries of foreign rule. Sassanian officials assumed responsibility for military affairs, major taxation, and communication with the imperial court, while traditional Mesopotamian administrators continued to manage local judicial proceedings, religious ceremonies, and community affairs. This administrative division enabled effective governance while preventing cultural conflicts that might have resulted from more radical governmental transformation. Cuneiform archives from the Sassanian period document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate new imperial administrative requirements. Scribal schools modified their curricula to include instruction in Middle Persian, the official administrative language of the Sassanian Empire, while maintaining traditional training in Aramaic and remaining cuneiform traditions for specialized religious and legal purposes. Bilingual administrative tablets from this period show Sassanian tax assessments and legal decisions recorded in Middle Persian alongside traditional Mesopotamian commercial and religious documents written in Aramaic, demonstrating practical accommodation between imperial and local administrative traditions. The military reorganization that accompanied Sassanian rule at Uruk involved the construction of new fortification systems and the establishment of professional garrison forces that integrated the city into broader imperial defensive networks. Sassanian military engineers designed fortifications that incorporated lessons learned from centuries of warfare against Roman legions, creating defensive systems capable of withstanding prolonged siege operations while maintaining communication with other imperial strongholds. The main defensive circuit constructed around Uruk featured massive stone foundations supporting brick superstructures reinforced with iron clamps and mortar containing volcanic ash that create exceptionally durable construction. Archaeological investigation of these Sassanian fortifications reveals sophisticated defensive architecture that combine traditional Near Eastern military engineering with innovations developed through conflict with Roman and Byzantine forces. The walls incorporated projecting towers at regular intervals that provided overlapping fields of fire for defensive artillery, while elaborate gate complexes featured multiple defensive chambers and portcullis systems that could halt attacking forces within killing zones. Underground passages connected different sections of the fortification system, enabling defenders to move reinforcements and supplies without exposure to enemy observation or artillery fire. The economic prosperity that characterized Uruk during the Sassanian period resulted from systematic imperial policies that promoted agricultural development, craft production, and long-distance trade throughout the empire. Sassanian authorities implemented comprehensive irrigation improvements that increased agricultural productivity while reducing labour requirements through more efficient water management systems. New canal construction incorporated advanced hydraulic engineering techniques that minimise water loss and improve distribution reliability, while systematic maintenance programs ensured long-term functionality of irrigation infrastructure. Archaeological surveys of the Uruk countryside show evidence for expanded settlement patterns and intensified agricultural production that supported growing urban populations while generating substantial surpluses for imperial taxation and commercial export. Sassanian agricultural innovations included the introduction of new crop varieties, improved cultivation techniques, and systematic livestock breeding programs that enhanced overall agricultural productivity. The development of sugarcane cultivation, introduced from India through Sassanian trade networks, created new commercial opportunities while diversifying agricultural production beyond traditional grain crops. The craft production that flourished at Uruk during the Sassanian period achieved unprecedented levels of technical sophistication and artistic achievement through imperial patronage and improved access to raw materials from throughout the empire. Metalworking shops produced steel implements and weapons that incorporated advanced Iranian metallurgical techniques with traditional Mesopotamian manufacturing methods, creating products renowned throughout the ancient world for their quality and durability. Archaeological analysis of metal artifacts from this period shows sophisticated alloy compositions and heat treatment processes that produced tools and weapons superior to contemporary Roman and Byzantine products. Textile production during the Sassanian period established Uruk as one of the empire's premier manufacturing centres through the development of silk weaving techniques and the production of luxury fabrics for imperial and international markets. Workshops employed hundreds of skilled weavers who created elaborate silk textiles decorated with complex patterns featuring royal imagery, religious symbolism, and mythological themes executed with extraordinary technical precision. Archaeological excavations in textile production areas have uncovered sophisticated dyeing installations, specialized looms, and storage facilities that demonstrate the industrial scale of these manufacturing operations. The religious policies implemented by Sassanian authorities at Uruk reflected the empire's official Zoroastrian ideology, while maintaining practical tolerance for traditional Mesopotamian spiritual practices and emerging Christian communities. Zoroastrianism became the preferred religion for imperial administration and military service, but traditional Mesopotamian deities continued to receive official recognition and financial support for temple maintenance and ceremonial activities. This religious accommodation created a complex spiritual environment that satisfied diverse religious communities while reinforcing imperial political authority through theological legitimation. The construction of fire temples throughout Uruk during the Sassanian period established Zoroastrian worship as a prominent feature of urban religious life while respecting existing spiritual traditions. These fire temples, built according to standardized architectural designs employed throughout the empire, featured central fire chambers where sacred flames burned continuously, surrounded by ceremonial spaces for religious instruction and community gatherings. Archaeological excavations have revealed sophisticated ventilation systems that maintained proper combustion conditions while preventing smoke accumulation, demonstrating advanced understanding of architectural engineering principles. The renovation of traditional Mesopotamian temple complexes during the Sassanian period incorporated Zoroastrian ceremonial elements while preserving established religious functions and architectural arrangements. The Yana temple complex underwent extensive modification that added fire altars for Zoroastrian ceremonies alongside traditional Mesopotamian ritual equipment, creating comprehensive religious facilities that served multiple spiritual communities within integrated architectural frameworks. Decorative programs combined traditional Mesopotamian religious imagery with Zoroastrian symbolic elements, producing artistic syntheses that communicated complex theological messages to diverse audiences. The emergence of Christian communities at Uruk during the Sassanian period reflected broader religious developments throughout Mesopotamia as Christianity spread eastward from Syria and Armenia. Sassanian religious policies generally tolerated Christian worship while requiring political loyalty to imperial authority, enabling Christian communities to establish churches and develop institutional structures without systematic persecution. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of several Christian churches at Uruk during the 5th and 6th centuries, featuring distinctive architectural elements, including basilica layouts, baptismal facilities, and decorative programs that adapted Christian symbolism to local artistic traditions. The educational institutions that operated at Uruk during the Sassanian period combined traditional Mesopotamian scholarly disciplines with Zoroastrian religious instruction and practical training in imperial administrative methods. Temple schools expanded their curricula to include Middle Persian language and literature, while maintaining instruction in Aramaic and specialized cuneiform traditions for religious and legal purposes. These educational programs produced administrators, religious personnel, and commercial specialists capable of serving diverse functions within the complex cultural environment of the Sassanian Empire. Archaeological excavations in educational facilities have uncovered extensive collections of texts written on parchment, papyrus, and traditional clay tablets that demonstrate the multilingual and multicultural character of Sassanian period education. Mathematical treatises show continued development of computational techniques for commercial and administrative applications, while astronomical texts document systematic observations that contributed to calendrical calculations and agricultural planning. Literary compositions include both traditional Mesopotamian works and new creations that reflected contemporary cultural interests and imperial ideological themes. The astronomical achievements of Sassanian period scholars at Uruk, built upon centuries of Mesopotamian observational traditions, while incorporating theoretical frameworks developed through contact with Indian and Greek scientific traditions. Sassanian astronomers maintained detailed records of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that enabled accurate prediction of celestial events and the creation of precise calendrical systems. These scientific activities contributed to the development of mathematical astronomy that influenced scholarly traditions throughout the Islamic world following the Arab conquest. The legal system that operated at Uruk under Sassanian administration combined traditional Mesopotamian jurisprudence with Zoroastrian religious law and imperial legal codes that applied throughout the empire. Sassanian authorities established courts that handled cases involving imperial interests, religious disputes, and conflicts between individuals from different ethnic or cultural backgrounds, while traditional legal institutions continue to manage local civil and commercial matters. This complex legal environment required sophisticated understanding of multiple legal traditions and created comprehensive judicial frameworks that could address diverse legal situations. Archaeological evidence from Sassanian period legal archives shows systematic documentation of property transfers, commercial contracts, and judicial proceedings using standardized legal formulas that accommodated various cultural expectations while maintaining consistent imperial standards. These records demonstrate the sophisticated legal frameworks that supported commercial activities and maintained social order within the multi-ethnic environment of the Sassanian Empire. The integration of different legal traditions created flexible judicial systems that balanced imperial requirements with local customs and community expectations. The urban development that occurred at Uruk during the Sassanian period involved comprehensive infrastructure improvements and population expansion that transformed the city into one of Mesopotamia's most prosperous urban centres. New residential districts constructed during this period incorporated advanced architectural techniques, including improved drainage systems, standardized building materials, and planned layouts that enhance living conditions while accommodating increased population density. These neighbourhoods featured distinctive Sassanian architectural elements, including barrel-vaulted roofs, decorative stucco work, and sophisticated ventilation systems that provided comfortable living environments in Mesopotamia's challenging climate. The commercial expansion that characterized Sassanian period Uruk resulted from the city's integration into imperial trade networks that connected the Mediterranean world with Central Asia, India, and China. Merchants from Uruk participated in lucrative silk trade operations while maintaining traditional commercial relationships with regional markets throughout Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau. Archaeological deposits from this period contain unprecedented quantities of imported goods, including Chinese silk, Indian spices and precious stones, Central Asian metalwork, and Mediterranean luxury items that demonstrate the extraordinary geographical scope of Sassanian commercial networks. The construction of new market facilities during the Sassanian period created comprehensive commercial infrastructure that supported growing trade volumes and manufacturing activities. Archaeological excavations have uncovered large warehouse complexes with sophisticated storage systems, standardized shop units arranged around central courtyards, and specialized production facilities for various craft industries. These commercial developments included banking facilities that provided financial services for long-distance trade, demonstrating the sophisticated commercial institutions that supported Sassanian economic prosperity. The demographic composition of Sassanian period Uruk included substantial populations of Iranians, Mesopotamians, Arabs, and other ethnic groups from throughout the empire, creating a cosmopolitan urban environment that fostered cultural exchange and innovation. Marriage relationships between different communities produced mixed populations that served as cultural intermediaries and facilitated communication between diverse groups. Archaeological evidence from cemetery sites shows burial practices that combined elements from multiple cultural and religious traditions, indicating the emergence of synthetic cultural identities that transcended traditional ethnic boundaries. The agricultural innovations implemented in Uruk's territorial district during the Sassanian period included the introduction of new irrigation technologies, crop varieties, and cultivation techniques that significantly increased productivity throughout the region. Sassanian engineers constructed advanced water management systems that incorporated underground channels, mechanical lifting devices, and distribution networks that enabled cultivation of previously marginal lands. These improvements supported growing urban populations while generating agricultural surpluses that contributed to imperial taxation and commercial export activities. Archaeological evidence shows the systematic expansion of cultivated areas and the development of specialized agricultural production that took advantage of regional environmental conditions and market opportunities. The cultivation of cotton, introduced through Sassanian trade connections with India, created new textile production opportunities while diversifying agricultural output beyond traditional food crops. Systematic livestock breeding programs improved the quality of horses, cattle, and sheep, while the development of commercial fisheries in artificial ponds provided additional protein sources for urban populations. The final phase of Sassanian rule at Uruk coincided with increasing pressure from Arab tribal confederations that had been expanding northward from the Arabian Peninsula since the late 6th century. The military campaigns launched by Islamic forces under the Rashidun Caliphate beginning in 633 AD created unprecedented challenges for Sassanian defensive capabilities already strained by prolonged conflicts with the Byzantine Empire. Archaeological evidence from the latest Sassanian levels at Uruk shows hasty defensive preparations and the concealment of valuable objects, indicating that local authorities recognized the seriousness of the Arab military threat. The Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 AD marked the decisive moment when Arab forces under Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas defeated the main Sassanian army and opened Mesopotamia to Islamic conquest. The aftermath of this victory enabled Arab forces to advance rapidly throughout the region, capturing major cities including Ctesiphon and establishing Islamic control over the former Sassanian heartland. Uruk's surrender to Arab forces in 637 AD marked the end of over 4 centuries of Sassanian rule and initiated the final transformation of ancient Mesopotamian urban civilization under Islamic administration. The surrender of Uruk to Arab forces in 637 AD occurred through negotiated capitulation rather than violent conquest, as local Sassanian administrators recognized the futility of resistance following the decisive Arab victory at Qadisiyah. The transition proceeded with remarkable efficiency as Arab military commanders implemented administrative policies that preserved existing governmental structures while establishing Islamic authority over the ancient Mesopotamian city. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period shows no significant destruction layers, indicating that the changeover occurred peacefully, with minimal disruption to urban life and economic activities. The initial Islamic administration of Urus under the Rashidun Caliphate maintained many existing Sassanian governmental practices while introducing new religious and legal frameworks based on Islamic principles. Arab military governors appointed to oversee Mesopotamian territories typically possessed extensive experience in tribal leadership and military organization, but relied heavily on former Sassanian administrators who understood local conditions and established bureaucratic procedures. This pragmatic approach enabled effective governance during the crucial early years of Islamic rule, while preventing the administrative chaos that might have resulted from complete governmental transformation. Cuneiform tablets from the earliest Islamic period document the systematic adaptation of traditional Mesopotamian record-keeping practices to accommodate new Islamic administrative requirements. Arabic gradually replaced Middle Persian as the primary language for official correspondence and legal documentation, while Aramaic and remaining cuneiform traditions continue to serve specialized religious and commercial functions within established communities. Bilingual administrative records from this period show Islamic tax assessments and legal decisions recorded in Arabic alongside traditional commercial contracts and property transfers written in Aramaic, demonstrating the practical accommodation between new Islamic governance and established local practices. The religious transformation that accompanied Islamic rule at Uruk involved the gradual conversion of substantial portions of the urban population to Islam, while maintaining official tolerance for existing Christian, Jewish and Zoroastrian communities. Islamic authorities implemented the dhimmi system that granted protected status to people of the book, enabling non-Muslim communities to maintain their religious practices and institutional structures in exchange for payment of special taxes and acceptance of certain legal restrictions. This policy prevented the religious conflicts that might have resulted from forced conversion, while encouraging voluntary adoption of Islam through social and economic incentives. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence for the construction of Uruk's first mosque during the early Umayyad period, built according to standardized architectural designs employed throughout the expanding Islamic Empire. This rectangular structure measured approximately 80 by 60 meters and featured a large prayer hall oriented toward Mecca, surrounded by covered arcades that provided shelter for worshippers and community gatherings. The mosque incorporated traditional Mesopotamian building techniques, including mud brick construction and bitumen mortar, while adopting distinctive Islamic architectural elements such as the mihrab prayer niche and minbar pulpit that define the building's religious function. The conversion of existing religious structures to Islamic use proceeded gradually throughout the 7th and 8th centuries, as Muslim populations increased and traditional religious communities declined through conversion and emigration. The ancient Iana temple complex underwent systematic modification that transformed ceremonial spaces into Islamic prayer areas, while preserving architectural elements that could serve new religious functions. Fire temples constructed during the Sassanian period were similarly adapted for Islamic worship through the removal of Zoroastrian ritual equipment and the installation of Islamic decorative elements that reoriented the buildings toward Mecca. The economic integration of Uruk into the expanding Islamic Empire created new commercial opportunities while fundamentally altering traditional trade relationships and manufacturing activities. The establishment of Islamic control over territories extending from Spain to Central Asia enabled merchants from Uruk to participate in commercial networks of unprecedented geographical scope, connecting Mediterranean markets with Indian Ocean trade routes through systematic Islamic commercial policies. Archaeological deposits from the early Islamic period contain substantial quantities of imported goods, including North African pottery, Spanish metalwork, Indian textiles, and Chinese ceramics that demonstrate Uruk's integration into these global Islamic trade systems. However, the economic transformation that accompanied Islamic expansion also created competitive pressures that gradually undermined Uruk's traditional commercial advantages. The establishment of Baghdad as the Abbasid capital in 762 AD created a new urban centre that attracted merchants, craftsmen and administrators who had previously contributed to Uruk's economic vitality. Baghdad's strategic position along major trade routes, combined with massive imperial investment in infrastructure and monumental construction, drew economic activity away from older Mesopotamian cities, including Uruk, Babylon, and Ctesiphon. Archaeological evidence shows a gradual decline in craft production at Uruk during the 8th and 9th centuries as workshops relocated to Baghdad and other emerging Islamic urban centres. Textile production, which had achieved particular prominence during the Sassanian period, contracted significantly as skilled weavers migrated to cities offering better economic opportunities and imperial patronage. Metalworking shops similarly reduced their operations as demand shifted to products manufactured in newer Islamic industrial centres that incorporated improved techniques and had better access to raw materials and markets. The urban population of Uruk began declining during the late Umayyad and early Abbasid periods as economic opportunities decreased and administrative functions transferred to newer Islamic cities. Residential districts that had housed substantial populations during the Sassanian period show evidence of gradual abandonment through the 8th century, with houses left empty and subsequently used for storage or converted to other purposes. Archaeological surveys indicate that entire neighbourhoods were abandoned as families migrated to Baghdad, Basra, and other growing Islamic urban centres that offered better prospects for economic advancement and social mobility. The irrigation systems that had supported intensive agriculture in Uruk's territorial district for over 3 millennia began experiencing systematic neglect during the 9th century, as reduced urban populations could no longer maintain the complex hydraulic infrastructure required for efficient water management. Canal systems constructed and maintained through centralized governmental organization required constant attention to prevent silting, structural damage, and water loss through seepage. The decline of local administrative capacity and the migration of skilled hydraulic engineers to other regions created maintenance deficits that gradually reduced agricultural productivity throughout the area. Archaeological investigation of abandoned canal systems shows evidence for systematic deterioration during the 9th and 10th centuries, as reduced water flow created stagnant pools that bred disease-carrying insects and contaminated remaining water supplies. Silt accumulation in main distribution channels reduced water delivery to agricultural areas, while structural damage to control gates and distribution works prevented effective water management during critical irrigation periods. The resulting agricultural decline created a downward spiral that further reduced urban populations and economic activity, accelerating the city's overall decline. The educational institutions that had preserved and transmitted Mesopotamian intellectual traditions for over 2 millennia faced particular challenges during the Islamic period, as Arabic replaced traditional scholarly languages and new Islamic educational priorities transformed curricular and institutional structures. Temple schools that had maintained cuneiform literacy and traditional mathematical and astronomical knowledge found their specialized expertise increasingly irrelevant as Islamic educational institutions emphasized Quranic studies, Islamic law, and Arabic literature. The last cuneiform tablets produced at Uruk date the late 8th century, marking the end of a writing tradition that had persisted for over 3,000 years. However, the astronomical and mathematical knowledge preserved in Mesopotamian scholarly traditions contributed significantly to Islamic scientific development through translation projects that transferred ancient knowledge into Arabic. Scholars working in Baghdad and other Islamic intellectual centers translated astronomical texts, mathematical treatises, and medical works from Aramaic and Middle Persian into Arabic, preserving essential elements of Mesopotamian scientific traditions within Islamic intellectual frameworks. These translation activities ensured that centuries of accumulated knowledge continued to influence scientific development throughout the Islamic world, even as the original institutional contexts disappeared. The gradual abandonment of Uruk's ancient urban core proceeded through several distinct phases during the 9th and 10th centuries, as different districts were abandoned in sequence according to their economic viability and strategic importance. The administrative quarter, which had housed governmental functions since the early dynastic period, was among the first areas to be abandoned as Islamic authorities transferred administrative operations to regional centres with better communication links and more substantial populations. Archaeological evidence shows that valuable building materials including stone blocks, metal fittings, and decorative elements were systematically removed from abandoned governmental buildings for reuse in construction projects at other locations. Residential areas experienced more gradual abandonment as individual families made decisions to relocate based on economic opportunities and social connections in other cities. Archaeological investigation of abandoned houses shows evidence for systematic removal of portable valuables and useful materials, indicating that departures were planned rather than forced through sudden crises. Some houses were temporarily reoccupied by later inhabitants who used them for storage or converted them to workshops, but overall population decline continued throughout the 9th century. The religious quarters surrounding the ancient temple complexes maintained some level of activity longer than other urban areas, as small communities of priests and traditional scholars attempted to preserve religious practices and scholarly traditions. Archaeological deposits from the 9th and 10th centuries show continued religious activities at reduced scales, with evidence for small-scale offerings, maintenance of sacred spaces, and preservation of religious texts and ritual equipment. However, these communities gradually diminished as older practitioners died and younger generations migrated to cities offering better prospects for religious careers within Islamic institutional frameworks. The final phase of urban occupation at Uruk occurred during the 10th century, when the ancient city site was used primarily for seasonal agricultural activities and temporary shelter by nomadic groups moving through the region. Archaeological evidence from this period shows minimal construction activity and temporary modifications to existing structures for basic shelter and storage purposes. The Great Ziggurat, which had dominated the urban landscape for over 2 millennia, was used as a quarry for building materials by local inhabitants who dismantled the fired brick facing for use in smaller construction projects. The environmental factors that contributed to Uruk's final abandonment included not only human-caused irrigation system failures, but also broader climatic changes that affected agricultural productivity throughout Mesopotamia during the medieval period. Paleoclimatic evidence suggests that the region experienced increased aridity during the 9th and 10th centuries, reducing river flow and making irrigation agriculture more difficult and less reliable. These environmental challenges compounded the economic and demographic problems created by political changes and urban competition, making it increasingly difficult to maintain viable urban communities at traditional Mesopotamian city sites. The transformation of the Uruk region from intensively cultivated agricultural land to pastoral grazing areas occurred gradually during the 10th and 11th centuries as abandoned irrigation systems created environmental conditions more suitable for nomadic animal husbandry than settled agriculture. Bedouin tribes from the Arabian Peninsula increasingly used the region for seasonal grazing, establishing temporary camps near reliable water sources and utilizing abandoned urban structures for shelter and storage. This economic transformation represented a fundamental change from the intensive agricultural systems that had supported urban civilization in Mesopotamia for over 4 millennia. Archaeological surveys conducted in the 20th century have documented the extent of site abandonment and environmental change that occurred during the medieval period. Satellite imagery and ground surveys reveal the remains of extensive canal systems, abandoned settlement sites, and agricultural field boundaries that demonstrate the scale of agricultural infrastructure that was abandoned during Uruk's decline. These archaeological remains provide crucial evidence for understanding the complex processes of urban abandonment and environmental transformation that marked the end of ancient Mesopotamian urban civilization. The rediscovery of Uruk by European archaeologists in the 19th century initiated systematic investigation of one of humanity's most important archaeological sites. German excavations beginning in 1912, under the direction of Julius Jordan, revealed the extraordinary sequence of cultural development that had occurred at the site over nearly 4 millennia. These investigations uncovered evidence for the world's first urban civilization, the development of writing, monumental architecture, and complex governmental systems that established fundamental patterns for human social organization. Modern archaeological techniques including stratigraphic excavation, radiocarbon dating, and scientific analysis of artifacts have provided detailed understanding of Uruk's development and significance within world history. Excavations have revealed the remarkable preservation of organic materials, architectural remains, and artifact assemblages that document the emergence and evolution of urban civilization with unprecedented detail. The cuneiform archives discovered at Uruk contain tens of thousands of tablets that provide direct insight into ancient economic systems, governmental organization, religious practices, and daily life in the world's first cities. The legacy of Uruk extends far beyond its archaeological significance to encompass fundamental contributions to human civilization that continue to influence modern society. The urban planning principles, governmental structures, legal systems, and educational institutions first developed at Uruk established patterns that spread throughout the ancient world and influenced the development of subsequent civilizations. The invention of writing at Uruk created the foundation for recorded history, literature, and systematic knowledge preservation that enabled the accumulation and transmission of human learning across generations. Contemporary archaeological research at Uruk continues to reveal new information about ancient Mesopotamian civilization while facing significant challenges from political instability, environmental degradation, and illegal excavation activities. International efforts to preserve and study the site have produced detailed documentation of architectural remains, comprehensive artifact catalogues, and digital reconstructions that make Uruk's archaeological heritage accessible to global audiences. These preservation efforts ensure that future generations will be able to study and appreciate the extraordinary achievements of humanity's first urban civilization. The story of Uruk represents one of the most remarkable chapters in human history, documenting the transformation from small agricultural villages to complex urban societies that established fundamental patterns for civilization development. From its emergence as the world's first city around 3500 BC, through its final abandonment in the 10th century AD, Uruk witnessed and participated in virtually every major development in ancient Near Eastern civilization. The city's 4,000-year history encompasses the invention of writing, the development of monumental architecture, the emergence of complex governmental systems, and the creation of literary traditions that continue to influence human culture today. While the ancient city lies abandoned beneath the desert sands of southern Iraq, its contributions to human civilization remain vibrant and essential elements of our shared cultural heritage.